Chapter 1. It was November 11th, 3001 AD. There wasn't much difference between this day and other days. If there was a difference, it was on this day that Guhan finally received the activation code for Sword Maiden Online and was able to enter this virtual game that had been running for more than 200 years. In this era, whether rich or poor, at the moment of birth, a miniature personal terminal would be implanted in the brain. This terminal relied on the quantum network and was connected to the world's central BAT United supercomputer. With the BAT United supercomputer's almost infinite capacity, all the electronic network computing functions that you could imagine were realized. These functions naturally included the game function. Because it was directly implanted in the cerebral cortex, the personal terminal could easily allow every player to enter a game world similar to a dream. Even without electricity, the personal terminal could directly work according to the player's brain electricity. The consequence of this was that it was very easy to get hungry. Often, after playing for a few hours, the player would be forcibly kicked out of the game due to hunger, and would then come back in after eating. Because the young brain was still developing, the law strictly prohibited humans under the age of 18 from entering any virtual game. Only adults over the age of 18 could receive the activation code automatically sent by BAT on their birthday, and thus enter Sword Maiden Online. At this time, human law enforcement was very perfect, because all crimes and violence were judged by BAT. As a computer, BAT made fair judgments without any emotions or selfish desires, so any opponents of BAT could not criticize the existence of BAT from this point of view. They were more preaching that sooner or later, BAT would awaken its own personality, and thus destroy all humans. Under the management of BAT, almost 90% of human society's administrative and law enforcement agencies were abolished, except for the council that stood at the top of the pyramid. Of the remaining 10%, most of the violent agencies like the police and armed police were left to maintain the basic safety of the city. At this time, the integrity and fairness of society had reached the peak of human imagination. There was no corruption or tyranny. It seemed that humans had stepped into the most glorious era, but in fact, this was the worst era for humans. Except for the remaining 8 superbase cities, humans had lost control of the rest of the Earth. At this time, humans were like fragile quails, hiding under the protection of the superbase cities, living a life that satisfied the minimum requirements for survival. Therefore, after 100 years of debate, the council decided to promote the game Sword Maiden Online. While consuming the excess mental energy and desire of young people, they hoped to train more sword bearers to protect the last 8 cities of humanity. For young people like Guhan who had just reached adulthood, he had had enough of the days before the age of 18. There was no entertainment, they were not allowed to go out, and other than the emergency evacuation every once in a while, there was almost no stimulating activity. Therefore, Sword Maiden Online became the thing that they looked forward to the most. They looked forward to entering the game to escape from the days of eating and waiting for death, or to soar into the sky and become a noble sword-bearer, sacrificing their lives for the future of humanity. Compared to other young people, Guhan looked forward to this day even more. He was extremely eager to become a sword-bearer, then rush out of this cage-like base city, fight with those goddamn Yuan Ku outside the city, and use their deaths to pay tribute to the spirits of his parents in heaven. Guhan was a poor child. In a major attack when he was 6 years old, he completely lost his parents, and his life was buried in the endless desire for revenge. Citizen ID 360103298311112461785419, Comrade Guhan, welcome to activating Sword Maiden Online. Fight for the future of humanity, and I wish you a happy birthday. A sweet and intellectual voice sounded in Guhan's mind. Immediately, Guhan felt a wave of drowsiness, and he could not resist closing his eyes. When he opened them again, he was already in an antique wooden house. Hello, Comrade Guhan, welcome to the world of Sword Maiden Online. This is your sword tomb, and also your personal space. You can enrich, decorate, and expand your sword tomb through your adventures in the world of Sword Maiden Online. For specific operating methods and information, you can refer to Sword Tomb in the help manual of Sword Maiden Online. This is your first time entering the game, and you must go through testing and setting before you can play. Would you like to start testing and setting now? If you choose yes, You can start testing and setting now. If you choose no, you can move around in the wooden house and think, but you cannot leave the wooden house until the testing and setting is completed. Start testing and setting now, there is no need to wait. What a joke! Guhan had been waiting for this moment for 12 years, and he did not want to wait a second longer. Understood, start testing and setting. First, set your name and appearance. You can maintain your original appearance and name, or completely change your appearance and name. Special note, after your appearance has been completely changed, your name will change from white to blue. At the same time, add a note, PS note, please set. You can also choose a random appearance. Please note that the random appearance may be beautified, and the range will jump between beautification by 150% and ugliness by 150%. Please choose carefully. Change your name to Military Governor. Guhan read out the game name he had long thought of. It was said that in ancient times, the military governor was a great profession. They led an astonishing number of ship girls to fight against an enemy called the Deep Sea. It was just that after 1,000 years of destruction, a lot of historical information had been destroyed, and the profession of military governor had also become an unofficial legend, appearing in unreliable street literature. Appearance, I'll choose random. Regarding the change of appearance, Guhan also had his own plan. To be honest, Guhan's appearance did not need to be modified at all. If he were to debut in China, he would directly kill the fresh meat-like boys, and attract a large number of brainless female fans. However, through a mysterious game group, a player's information exchange group that could only be accessed by those with the highest level of the forum, Guhan received a mysterious piece of information. When entering the game to set the appearance, choose random, and you can get the hidden blessing attribute to strengthen. The higher the degree of the random ugliness, the more the blessing attribute will increase. Compared with the blessing attribute that affected the direction of the game's life, the appearance was naturally not worth mentioning. This is your right, Comrade Guhan, but any modification that exceeds the beautification limit will be added with Photoshop comment. Starting the appearance randomization, very unfortunately, you've randomized to 120% ugliness. In the next moment, Ji Yuhan's extraordinarily handsome face was slashed once, twice, thrice, 4 times. From his forehead to his chin, from his eyes to his lips, his entire body was slashed to a pulp. Fresh blood and flesh also came out from within, causing his originally handsome face to instantly become incomparably terrifying. The so-called 120% ugliness was actually 4 deep scars on Guhan's face, like fat worms. Interesting. I don't think girls will like me like this. Guhan touched his disfigured face. But it doesn't matter. According to the group, my blessing has increased by at least 10 points. Father, mother, sister, Guhan must become the strongest, kill all of Yuan Ku, and avenge all of you. Starting the class setting. Do you wish to be a swordsman at the front of the battle, or a swordsman supporting from the rear? There is no difference between a swordsman and a swordsman. Comrade Guhan, please decide according to your own ability. Swordsman, I only want a swordsman. Guhan gritted his teeth. Alright, player military governor has chosen to be a swordsman. Starting initial attribute assessment. Initial attribute assessment complete, starting to generate attribute panel. Player name, military governor. Player gender, male. Player appearance, 70% ugliness. Overall physique rating, 4 stars. Class, swordsman. Health points, 100 sword energy points, 90 innate sword elements, 9 quarks. Acquired sword elements, 0 quarks. Game sword elements, 0 quarks. Estimated game sword elements conversion rate, 0.009%. Title, none. Wealth, 0 renminbi, young man, you need to buy credit, property, 1 thatched cottage, do you want a luxurious villa with a waterside karaoke? As long as you fight, there's nothing you can't do. Status, commoner, there's no human with a lower status than you. Reputation, unknown, actually, you're pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, right? Achievement, worthless, you don't have any achievements now, at least get yourself an achievement. Let me tell you a secret, you can get an achievement by killing yourself. Special reminder, Comrade Guhan, according to the latest real-life sword element assessment, the sword element value in your body is 9 quarks. It doesn't meet the minimum requirement of 100 quarks for a swordsman. According to the estimated conversion rate, you need to obtain 9,000 quarks of game sword elements in the game to convert 90 quarks of acquired sword elements. In reality, the probability of the total quark value in your body reaching 100 is 0.0001%. Do you still insist on becoming a swordsman? Yes, I insist. Guhan's expression did not change. It was obvious that he already knew the number of quarks in his body. The so-called quark value was synchronized with the sword lady in reality and became the minimum value for a swordsman. In reality, it was difficult for most people with a sword element value of 100 to synchronize with the sword lady. There was only a 3% chance. Only when the value reached around 200 would there be a 20% chance of synchronizing with the sword lady. According to the analysis of millions of cases, humans discovered that before the age of 18, the sword element value in a person's body would naturally increase. At that time, the sword element value would increase more rapidly. Most of the swordsmen in the world would naturally increase to 100 quarks before the age of 18. Then, they would enter the 8 major sword lady academies to undergo swordsman training. They would search for a sword lady who could resonate with them and become a swordsman. Later, humans discovered that after the age of 18, they could also use a series of complicated methods to stimulate the brain and artificially increase the sword element value in the body. Therefore, humans called the number of sword elements in the body at the age of 18 innate sword element value. The sword element value obtained after the age of 18 through training was called acquired sword element value. The only way to increase the acquired sword essence was to play sword Maiden online. Research found that humans could actively increase the sword element value in the body by simulating swordsman battles in Sword Lady Online. However, a large number of facts also showed that the lower the innate sword element value, the lower the conversion rate of sword element value in the game to acquired sword element value. Only those who had around 80 to 100 quarks could possibly increase to the lowest limit of 100 quarks after the game. As for those who had less than 80 quarks, it was rare to see such an exception among hundreds of thousands of people. Moreover, Guhan's innate sword element value was only 9 quarks. However, there was still a glimmer of hope. In history, there was a guy with an innate sword element value of only 2 quarks. After the game, he successfully reached 100 quarks. Then, he successfully synchronized with the sword lady and became a swordsman. However, that guy soon died in battle. This successful person was all Guhan's hope. He was his idol. Guhan told himself countless times subconsciously that he could be like that guy and become a swordsman through the game's training. He could do it. Final confirmation, Comrade Guhan. Do you really want to become a swordsman? The system confirmed Guhan's choice for the last time. Yes, I confirm. Comrade Guhan, when you open the door, you will enter the initial swordsman instance dungeon, Legend of Go Jian, the King of Yu. Do you need me to briefly introduce the instance dungeon to you? No need. Ji Yu Han decisively rejected the system's beginner's help. In this world, there was no one who knew this beginner's dungeon better than Ji Yu Han. Chapter 2. As a newcomer to Sword Maiden Online, after the initial test and selection, they had to enter the initial dungeon. According to the completion and perfection of the dungeon, they would get different initial sword maidens, as well as some small rewards. As a newcomer, they had to go through this dungeon, and it was also the dungeon with the most strategy posts. After hundreds of years of continuous development, the internet had long been filled with all kinds of detailed strategies and methods to clear the dungeon. It could be called a fool-level strategy. Even a fool could easily clear the dungeon as long as he followed the steps in the strategy. In fact, even if you did nothing, you could still clear the dungeon. There was no possibility of failure in this dungeon. For hundreds of years, the success rate for newcomers was as high as 100%. On the other hand, the SSS rating of this instance dungeon was forever stuck at 0%. For hundreds of years, not a single newbie had managed to raise the rating of this instance dungeon to the SSS rating. Even for the lower SS rating, only one person had managed to reach such a high level. A series of indicators such as the damage suffered by the player in the dungeon, the damage dealt, the time taken to clear the dungeon, and so on were put together to form the rating after clearing the dungeon. According to the rating, the order was SSS, SS, S, A, B, C, D, and E, with E being the lowest and SSS the highest. However, the evaluation criteria for the initial dungeon was very simple. It was only based on one indicator, and that was the time taken to clear the dungeon. If you cleared the initial dungeon within an hour, you would be able to get the highest SSS rating. According to the data published by BAT, the number of people who cleared the initial dungeon with an E rating accounted for 30% of the people who cleared the dungeon. This was because as time passed, the strategy became more and more detailed. Later generations followed the strategy and gradually reduced this percentage. In the first few years of the game, the number of people who cleared the dungeon with an E rating was as high as 85%. It should be known that in most of the commoner dungeons in Sword Maiden, the number of people who cleared the dungeon with an E rating did not exceed 10%. After that, it was 20% for the D rating, 40% for the C rating, 7% for the B rating, 2% for the A rating, and only 1% for those above the A rating. Therefore, the initial dungeon was also known as the most difficult dungeon in history. This meant that this dungeon's difficulty was heaven-defying, but it was impossible to fail. It was worth mentioning that this instance dungeon was different from other instance dungeons that could be refreshed. Anyone could only enter the initial instance dungeon once upon entering the game. After that, they would not be able to enter the instance dungeon again. The first time they refreshed the instance dungeon would be their rating for the rest of their life. Even if they surpassed the godly sword god, swept away Yuan Ku, and became the world's number one, and all the other instance dungeons were SSS rank, if they cleared the initial instance dungeon for the first time and got a pitiful E rank, then they would have to bear this E rank rating for the rest of their life, until eternity. Such cases were not uncommon. At present, the so-called strongest swordbearer of humanity had also expressed his annoyance at the fact that his initial instance dungeon was only at E class. He even expressed his willingness to fork out half of his wealth in exchange for the right to enter the initial instance dungeon again. This was also the reason why so many people desperately researched this instance dungeon strategy. Since they could not prove themselves with their own rating, they could only prove themselves with the strategy. If someone used their own strategy to refresh the initial instance dungeon and got an A rank or above, then it would indirectly prove that they were not the swordbearer. Since the age of 8, Guhan began to collect various strategies for the initial instance dungeon. He studied every detail and every step. After 10 years of hard work, it could be said that every brick in this instance dungeon had been deeply imprinted in Guhan's mind. To put it bluntly, there was probably no one in this world who understood the initial instance dungeon better than Guhan. However, Guhan did not do this to obtain an A rank or above. He did not care about the rating. This kind of empty reputation was meaningless to him. What he cared about was something in this instance dungeon. When talking about the initial instance dungeon's rating, many people were filled with resentment. However, when it came to the things obtained in the initial instance dungeon, most people's memories were indifferent. It seemed that other than their own initial sword mistress, there were no memorable rewards in this instance dungeon. Indeed, even if it was the one and only SS rank, the reward obtained was only the initial sword mistress. There were 3 inherent elements. First, there were some beginner's necessities. These things could be bought in the system store for a few dollars. No one would care about these things. However, Guhan cared. Guhan had a vague guess. If this guess was true, then Guhan would receive an unprecedented reward. A reward that would allow Guhan to surpass all the other beginners. A reward that many people could not obtain even after playing the game for a lifetime. Guhan had to obtain this reward. This was his only hope to greatly increase his acquired sword essence points. Welcome to the prologue of Sword Mistress Online, Yu Wang Go Jian Jian. As the system's voice faded, Guhan felt his vision go black. When he saw the light again, he found himself squeezed into a very narrow space. His waist was tightly held by something. His left hand was pressed down, while his right hand could move freely. Through the light that shone through the cracks above him, he could vaguely see his surroundings. He was surrounded by broken concrete, broken furniture, and all kinds of broken household items. This was a collapsed house, and Ji Han was trapped under it. System notification, main quest refresh, quest 1, escape from the ruins of the house. Quest time, unlimited. This was the first predicament that Han faced. Escape from the collapsed house. It seemed that this quest was very difficult. In the TV, after every earthquake, every trapped survivor would be rescued from the ruins by the firemen outside. It would take more than 10 hours and a variety of mechanical equipment. Ordinary people could not rely on their own strength to escape from the ruins. In fact, everyone was misled by the TV. Most of the survivors relied on their own strength to climb out of the ruins. Moreover, it did not take much time. Because most of the survivors were buried very shallow, there were not many things that could trap them. They could save themselves by struggling a little. The survivors that needed to be rescued by the firemen were buried very deep. Such survivors accounted for a very small proportion of the total number of survivors. When new players entered the dungeon, they would be buried in such a shallow position. A few hundred years ago, when the game was first released, the newcomers would first use their right hand to move the debris around their left hand, freeing their left hand. When both hands were free, they could break the bicycle handle that was hugging their waist. This was not difficult, because the bicycle handle itself was already broken in half. An ordinary person could break it with their strength. After the waist was successfully freed, the player would be surprised to find that their legs were not trapped too tightly. With a little force, they could kick out a small space. What they needed to do next was to follow the direction where the light shone in and throw the ruins in front of them under their feet. They would become their own stepping stones. Step by step, they would climb out of the ruins. The whole process would take about an hour. As a beginner's dungeon that did not make things difficult for the players, the whole process of escaping was not complicated. There was also nothing that blocked them. Ordinary people could easily escape. If he was stupid or physically weak, it didn't matter. He just had to wait there patiently without moving. After 3 hours, a kind-hearted person would find him and rescue him from the outside. The first mission was very simple, very easy, no pressure at all, right? It was not wrong for a newbie to think this way, but according to the official information, if one wanted to get an SSS rating, the entire mission had to be done within an hour. If Gu Han had to spend an hour to complete each of the first missions, there would be nothing left to do. Therefore, many players with SSS rating as their goal kept researching the entire escape process. For example, optimizing the escape process, finding the best route and other methods were also researched. In the end, they could only reduce the time to 20 minutes. This was a result that could only be achieved by those who had experienced escape simulation before entering the game. Gu Han did not do any escape simulation. He did not have time to waste on that kind of thing. Moreover, he had a better way to get out of the ruins. Gu Han quickly wiped his right hand under his armpit, and a handful of $1 coins appeared in his palm. Next to the coins was a broken savings box. This was the pocket money that a child had saved for a semester. This child was planning to buy a DNF New Year's set. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh now. After Gu Han silently counted to 7, he did not hesitate to throw the coin in his hand through the gap above. Then, Gu Han quickly lowered his head, closed his eyes tightly, and curled his body as deep as possible into the gap. Gu Han had to do this because in the next second, a blinding laser beam pierced through most of the ruins. The edge of the beam just grazed Gu Han's hair as it flew past. If Gu Han did not lower his head just now, his head would have been blasted into pieces. Oh, there are fish that escaped the net here. A hearty female voice like that of a boy sounded in the ruins. She walked to where Gu Han was, grabbed Gu Han's collar, and gently pulled Gu Han out of the ruins. So it's a wretched guy. She glanced at Gu Han, who had his eyes closed, and scolded him disdainfully. Then, she gently threw Gu Han into the air. It was hard to believe that this girl's arm strength was so strong. She actually threw Gu Han, who weighed more than 100 pounds, over 100 meters in the air. Then, he drew a beautiful arc in the air, and fell a few kilometers away. Then, The girl did not hesitate to leave in the opposite direction of where Guhan fell. Guhan was just a sudden situation, and the girl did not intend to go to where he fell. Indeed, she had more important things to do with Guhan's life and death. Chapter 3. As expected, this is indeed the fastest way to reach the destination. Guhan, who had been thrown a few kilometers away, got up easily and patted the dust off his body. Although an average person would definitely die if they fell from a height of more than 10 meters, Guhan didn't seem to be a big deal. Although there were many wounds on his body, they were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. This was the reason why the initial dungeon had no difficulty at all. Every newbie who entered the dungeon had a 100 times increase in HP, a 1000 times increase in HP recovery rate, and when one's HP was left with 1 point, they would no longer receive any damage. Even if you wanted to die, you could not. Looking at the 3-story building with the signboard of Old Frank's Grocery, Guhan knew that he had arrived at his next destination. System notification. Quest updated. Quest 1. Escape from the ruins, complete. System notification. Quest updated. Quest 2. Find Old Frank's Grocery, no time limit. Note: after 12 hours, the system will automatically teleport the player to the grocery. System notification. Quest updated. Quest 2. Find Old Frank's Grocery, complete. System notification. Quest updated. Quest 3. Enter the grocery and find the fleeting youth calendar. Less than a minute had passed since Guhan entered the dungeon. Guhan had already completed 2 quests and entered the 3rd quest. In the initial dungeon strategy post with the highest number of clicks on the official forums, the time needed to climb out of the ruins was limited to around 20 minutes, and to find Old Frank's grocery store from the ruins would require around 10 minutes. Therefore, most of the players who strictly followed the strategy post would need more than 30 minutes to complete the 1st and 2nd mission. No one could have imagined that there would be a day when there would be someone who would have less than a minute to complete the task that they would need 30 minutes to complete even if they gave it their all. Since it was the guide post with the highest number of clicks, it was clear that this guide had been widely accepted and optimized to the best of the best. The fact that the 1st and 2nd quests required at least 30 minutes to complete had become the golden rule in the hearts of countless players. They could never have imagined that someone could actually shorten this step to within a minute. If this fact were to be made public, Sword Maiden Online's forums would instantly explode. So the question was, how did Guhan find this shortcut? Truth be told, it took Guhan 2.5 years to find this shortcut. One day, Guhan, who was searching through millions of beginner dungeon guideposts, suddenly found a post from 70 years ago. The original poster wrote in a complaining tone, saying that he had rushed into the dungeon excitedly, and casually picked up a handful of coins. Then, he carelessly threw the coins away, and was caught by Yuan Ku from the ruins, and thrown more than 10 kilometers away. It took him a full 3 hours to find Old Frank's grocery store, and in the end, he only received a C-grade evaluation. At the end of the post, he also reminded others that if they found something like a coin, they must not throw it out. It could kill them. The number of views of this post was not high. From the time it was first posted to the time Guhan saw the post, it had been more than 70 years. The total number of views was less than 1,000, and there were only about 30 replies. Most of the people who followed the post were laughing at the original poster's bad luck, and were here to watch a joke. When Guhan saw this post for the first time, he was like most of the people who followed the post, feeling that there was no value in it. However, unlike most of the people who followed the post, Guhan firmly remembered the content of the post, and remembered the lesson of not throwing coins away. 2 years passed, and Guhan, who had roughly formulated a strategy, realized that the strategy he designed could not be shortened to within an hour. If he could not complete the dungeon within an hour, it would be impossible to get an SSS grade evaluation. If he could not get an SSS grade evaluation, Guhan's ambition as a swordsman would be reduced to a puff of smoke. At that time, Guhan was almost in a state of madness. He revised and reviewed his strategy day and night. He studied it hundreds of times from beginning to end. He found that the ones that wasted the most time and had the highest optimization potential were Mission 1 and Mission 2. These 2 missions took up half of the planning time in half an hour, which was unacceptable. Thus, Guhan began to desperately study ways to optimize the first and second missions. Suddenly, one day, Guhan recalled a post he had read before. Guhan realized that although the owner of the post spent 3 hours to complete the first and second missions, these 3 hours were actually the time to complete the second mission. In this case, the actual time spent on the first mission was only a mere 20 seconds. One had to know that the fastest time taken to complete the first mission previously took a full 20 minutes. This discovery made Guhan ecstatic. He studied this post over and over again as if he had found a treasure, looking for other posts with similar situations. After a few months of sorting, Guhan was surprised to find that there were other players who had thrown other things out, such as mice, badges, gravel, Coke bottles, plastic blocks, but they were not discovered and pulled out by Yuan Ku. Only this player, who threw a handful of coins, was discovered by Yuan Ku. Could it be that only by throwing a coin out would Yuan Ku discover it? In order to verify his theory, Guhan posted on the internet and found a player who was about to turn 18 and was activating the game for the first time. He made a deal with him, agreeing to let him throw a handful of coins out as well. He wanted to see if Yuan Ku would discover and throw it out, and where it would land. A few days later, the player sent news. He was indeed discovered and thrown out by Yuan Ku, just like the original poster. However, he seemed to be more unlucky, as he was thrown further away. It took him a full 5 hours to find the location of Old Frank's grocery store. This meant that Yuan Ku's throwing distance and landing point were not fixed. Or perhaps, there was a pattern to the landing point. Guhan was keenly aware of this point. He felt that this was the key to completing the mission. If there was a pattern to Yuan Ku throwing people out, then he, Guhan, would be able to use Yuan Ku's hand to reach wherever he wanted. Thus, in order to verify his conjecture, Guhan invested all his savings and hired a large number of newbies to enter the instance dungeon. From the timing of the coin toss, the number of coins tossed, the strength of the coin toss, etc., he conducted various experiments in an attempt to find the pattern of Yuan Ku throwing people out. However, after investing a large amount of money, Guhan sadly discovered that there was no pattern to Yuan Ku throwing people out. The same number of coins tossed at the same time, with the same amount of strength, some people were thrown tens of kilometers away, while others were thrown a few kilometers away. After a few months, not only did Guhan not get what he wanted, he also became a joke in the forum. Many people hired by Guhan posted on the forum, writing about their experiences of being hired by Guhan, earning Guhan the nickname of Coin Idiot. The large amount of hiring money quickly depleted Guhan's savings. Guhan had no choice but to stop this experiment of spending money. However, he did not give up. He believed that in the 200 years of accumulated posts, he would definitely be able to find what he wanted. Finally, hard work paid off. On a day 2.5 years later, Guhan suddenly found a post with less than 20 hits. This post described something like this. The original poster of the post was born with a bad sense of direction. After coming out from the ruins, he was unable to find the location of Old Frank's grocery store. He wandered around like a headless fly for almost 11 hours. When he reached the power plant, he gave up and decided to close his eyes to rest, preparing to wait for the system to automatically teleport him after 12 hours. Suddenly, he was grabbed by something and thrown out. When he landed, he opened his eyes and saw that he was at Old Frank's grocery store. There were many things written at the end of the post, but Guhan could no longer read it. His attention was completely attracted by the story in front. The original poster was also pulled up by Yuan Ku and thrown out. Although he wasn't pulled out from the ruins, he was thrown at the entrance of Old Frank's grocery store. Thinking about it, could this Yuan Ku who threw players like grenades be the same Yuan Ku? If it was the same Yuan Ku, why was the second player thrown by Yuan Ku to the entrance of the grocery store? Did this player do something special? Guhan hurriedly looked at the post a few more times and realized that the most unique thing about this player was that he dragged it out for more than 10 hours. This was meaningless. It would be too late if he dragged it out for more than 10 hours. The second thing was that it was very far from Old Frank's grocery store. It was near the power plant, But that was meaningless. Ji Han could walk to old Frank's grocery store 5 times before reaching the power plant. The last thing was that the player was sleeping with his eyes closed. With a hopeless situation, Gu Han decided to find another player to give it a try. However, this time, he did not spend money to find someone. Instead, he found his best online friend, a person who was about to turn 18 and was activating the game for the first time. After learning about Ji Han's thoughts, the best friend first mocked and scolded Ji Han. Then, he said that he would reluctantly help Ji Han this time. He closed his eyes and threw a handful of coins to prove how stupid Ji Han was. Then, he entered the game. 2 hours later, a shocking piece of news came out from the forums. Someone had broken the initial Instance Dungeons rating record. The original S-Class rating record was raised to SS Class. At the same time, the original record time of 2 hours, 27 minutes and 51 seconds to 1 hour, 50 minutes and 38 seconds was raised to 1 hour, 50 minutes and 38 seconds. Chapter 4. As mentioned before, the development and operation of Sword Maiden Online had 2 main purposes. First, it was to relieve the mental stress of a large number of people who had nothing to do and were just waiting to die. It was to enrich their lives in the virtual world. The second goal was to find and train the mainstay of human society, the swordbearers. He wanted to create an illusory world to hone their combat skills. After all, the mortality rate of actual combat was too high. 50% of the swordbearers would not survive the first 5 battles of their lives. In order to restore the real battle environment and process as much as possible, all the battle dungeons in Sword Maiden Online were based on the typical and well-known battles that actually happened in history. Every scene, every building, every scenery, every enemy, and every NPC in the dungeon had a history of real battles that could be verified. They were real dungeons that actually existed, and not the ramblings of a group of otakus. For example, the beginner's instance dungeon that Gu Han was in, Yu Wang Go Jian Jian. The original story of this instance dungeon was known by everyone in human society. Just like the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, Qin Huang and Han Wu, there was not a single person on Earth who did not know of this story. This was because this story represented the end of an era and the beginning of another. Yu Wang Go Jian 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 took place almost 1,000 years ago in 2024 AD. Countless cracks appeared in the dimension wall that bordered the 3D and 2D worlds for no apparent reason. A large number of 2D people poured into the 3D world through the cracks and began a cruel war against the 3D world that lasted more than 1,000 years. Humans had given these enemies from the second dimension a name full of anger and sorrow, Yuan Ku. Why is he called Yuan Ku? It was probably because the second bandit sounded too stupid and the second bandit sounded too lame. At the beginning of the war, the human race suffered a crushing defeat. As a 2-dimensional existence, Yuan Ku was naturally immune to all 3-dimensional attacks. Their figures appeared in human vision, but their bodies seemed to be stored in another world. No matter how many bullets or how big the missiles were, they would pass through their bodies without causing any damage. In the words of the US Defense Minister at that time, those Yuan Ku were like ghosts and phantoms. They could be seen but not touched. Our brave soldiers had used up tens of thousands of bullets, but they could not cause any damage to them. However, these ghosts and phantoms could hurt us. Their swords could easily pierce through our bodies, their guns could fire without bullets, and they could even transform into magical girls to release super magic that could destroy the world. My dear members of Parliament, I have to admit that it's time for us to meet God. In just 5 days, the entire world's defense system had completely collapsed. Countless cities had been turned into ruins by all kinds of attacks, and countless humans had died in Yuan Yang's hands. According to the statistics, in just 5 days, the Earth's population of 7 billion had been reduced by 2/3, leaving less than 2 billion people. Just when all humans were ready to die and welcome destruction, the Sword Ladies appeared. It had appeared so suddenly and so powerfully. They appeared in front of the terrified humans like saviors and started a battle of life and death with the powerful Yuan Ku. In the end, 1,000 years later, humans relied on the 8 superbase cities to fight against the Yuan Ku for the right to survive. The king of Yu, Go Jian Jian, was the first sword lady to appear in this world. The King of Yu, Go Genjen, recreated the story of how the King of Yu, Go Genjen, and her swordbearer fought against Yuan Ku for the first time and won. It was a story that was sung by millions of people, and everyone was familiar with it. There were two main characters in the story. One was the sword lady, Go Genjen, and the other was her first swordbearer, Fleeting Calendar, a man who was later known as Kanzu. In the current dungeon, Fleeting Calendar, the Kanzu who had been sung for 1,000 years, was still a cowardly ordinary person. He hid in his family's honest man's grocery and waited to die. He did not have the slightest awareness of being a savior. Guhan's mission was to find this man and lead him to the path of a savior. The Fleeting Calendar was not difficult to find because his location had been marked out by countless guides. The fastest route was also marked out by the guides again and again. Guhan obediently followed the route marked by the guides and did not try to throw a coin in front of Fleeting Calendar. There was no shortcut for this mission. Guhan had searched for 10 years but could not find any clues. Fortunately, this route did not require too much time. Although the front door of the grocery store was open, Guhan did not enter from the front door. This was because the path inside had long since been blocked by some collapsed plywood. The only intersection was at the side of the grocery store, where there was a small room used as a warehouse. The anti-theft net there had been removed halfway, and the window could be easily opened. After entering the warehouse, Guhan found that it was in a mess, as if it had been ransacked by someone. This was normal, because the person who ransacked it was none other than Fleeting Calendar himself. Storing precious food and water was something that every otaku knew. This was also why the warehouse could lead to Fleeting Calendar's location. Pushing open the warehouse door, he saw that the stairs had been blocked by falling rocks. There was also a hole in the ceiling above him. Guhan leaped up and grabbed the edge of the broken ceiling. He then did a pull-up and easily reached the second floor of the grocery store. The room where Fleeting Calendar was hiding was easy to find. It was the only room on the second floor that was undamaged. "Stop. Who are you? Don't come in. I have a gun." As Guhan was about to knock on the door, he heard a threatening voice coming from the room. The voice was so nervous that it sounded like it was breaking. "Is it Fleeting Calendar? Don't misunderstand me. I'm someone sent by Zhong Yaru to find you." Ji Han replied according to the guide. "What? You're someone sent by my mother?" The voice in the room was filled with joy. "Is my mother all right?" "Of course she's all right. Your mother is the chief of the police. She's currently protecting a large group of civilians in the underground storage room of the museum. It's very safe there. That's why she asked me to bring you there." Just as the guide described, Fleeting Calendar did not hesitate to open the door when he heard that he was sent by his mother. This was the only answer that would make Fleeting Calendar lower his guard and open the door. Do not underestimate these few sentences. If the answer was wrong, Fleeting Calendar would not open the door. If that was the case, he would have to wait for another hour for the system to force the door open. System notice. Quest updated. Quest 3. Find Fleeting Calendar completed. System notice. Quest updated. Quest 4. Obtain Fleeting Calendar's trust and lead him to the Jingchu Province Museum. "Uncle. Big brother. Please come in. Do you want something to eat? I have some instant noodles with me. Have a bowl to fill your stomach." Fleeting Calendar was expecting to see an uncle, but he did not expect to see an older brother who was only a few years older than him. However, the 4 hideous scars on this elder brother's face looked a little too terrifying. Is this the young Kunzu? Although Ji Han knew that this might arouse the Sword Master's suspicion, he couldn't help but look at the Sword Master's appearance carefully. This was the Sword Master when he was young. He was different from the Sword Master in countless photos and portraits, who stood with a sword and did not change his expression when facing tens of thousands of Yuan Li. At this time, the Sword Master's face was full of words such as hairless face, incompetent and very stupid and naive. "Is there something on my face?" Fleeting Calendar felt that Guhan's expression was similar to that of a panda in the zoo. "Yes, there's a small piece of vegetable leaf on the side of your mouth." Guhan wiped the corner of Fleeting Calendar's mouth. "All right, come with me to see your big sister Zhong. She's worried sick." All right, wait for me. I'll come after I pack my things. Fleeting Calendar did not doubt the older brother who came to pick him up. He happily returned to his room to pack his luggage. Fleeting Calendar, don't bring any food with you, said Guhan when he saw Fleeting Calendar running towards the pile of food in his room. Why? My mother saved so many people. She must need a lot of food. Fleeting Calendar was puzzled. You don't know, but the streets are filled with yuan ku. Their noses are as sensitive as dogs. If you bring food with you, they will follow the scent and track you down. You'll lose your life. I've seen too many people killed by yuan ku over the past few days because of food, said Guhan sadly. In truth, he was just bullsh*ting. Yuan ku would not care if you brought food with you or not. However, not only would it waste a lot of time for Fleeting Calendar to pack food, it would also slow down the entire journey. Oh my God, how could this be? Fleeting Calendar did not doubt Guhan's words. He threw away the food in his hand without hesitation and turned to his wardrobe. He had to bring some clothes with him. Student Fleeting Calendar, you can only carry a bag at most. Guhan hurriedly said, the basement of the museum has been sealed. There's only a very narrow entrance. If you bring too many bags with you, you won't be able to pass through this entrance. Only one bag. Fleeting Calendar began to hesitate. He did not know what he should put in the bag. Quick, I'll help you. Guhan did not have the time to let Fleeting Calendar hesitate. He quickly ran into his room and found a toothbrush, a towel, a notebook, a pen, an iPad 11, an iPhone 14, and a few other miscellaneous items in less than 40 seconds. He then stuffed them all into Fleeting Calendar's bag. Fleeting Calendar stared at his older brother stuffing things into his bag. His older brother seemed to know his room better than he did. There were many things that Fleeting Calendar could not find, such as under the bed, under the table, or in places where he could not find them, but his older brother was able to find them without a second's delay. Fleeting Calendar carefully looked at the things that his older brother was packing. They were all things that he wanted to take with him. Not a single thing was missing. He could not think of anything else that he needed to take with him. Thank God I didn't make a mistake. Fleeting Calendar was shocked. On the other side, Guhan also let out a sigh of relief. It took him a month to memorize the locations of the 50 items on the guide. If he took even one of the items wrongly, the Fleeting Calendar would refuse to help him pack his bag, and he would have to do it himself. The guide clearly stated that if Fleeting Calendar were to pack his bag by himself, it would take him 25 minutes. There was no way he could complete the quest within an hour. Therefore, Guhan had to use the fastest speed and 100% accuracy to find everything in one go. Guhan only had one chance. If he failed, Fleeting Calendar would not allow him to pack his bag a second time. If he tried to do it by force, he would fall out with Fleeting Calendar and raise his suspicions, wasting even more time. Big brother, let's go. I want to see my mother as soon as possible. Fleeting Calendar urged Guhan as he stood at the door with his bag on his back. Student Fleeting Time, can you lend me your sword? Guhan asked as he pointed at a sword hanging on the wall. It was a normal sword, but it would play an important role in Fleeting Calendar's plan. Sure, no problem, Fleeting Calendar agreed without hesitation. Let's go. Guhan slammed the door shut and left Old Frank's convenience store with Fleeting Calendar, who had no idea how dangerous the road ahead would be. At that moment, only 3 minutes had passed since Guhan entered the dungeon. Everything was going according to plan. Chapter 5. The Qingpin Sword. Guhan was puzzled as he looked at the inscription on the sword. Why didn't any of the guides mention that the sword had a name engraved on it? Brother Guhan, do you like this sword? Fleeting Year Calendar, who was walking behind Guhan, asked when he saw Guhan staring at the sword. That's right. This sword looks really good. I wonder where you bought it from. Fleeting Year Calendar asked casually. I'm not sure. It was given to me by my father. I think it was given to me by my grandmother when she was dancing in the public square. My grandmother passed away, so my father gave it to me. Fleeting Year Calendar seemed a little sad when he mentioned his grandmother. So it's something left behind by your grandmother. Don't worry, I'll return it to you after I send you to the museum. It's fine. I don't know how to wield a sword. If it wasn't for Brother Guhan wanting to use it, I would have left it at home and never seen it again. Since Brother Guhan likes it, I'll give it to you as a gift from Fleeting Year Calendar, Fleeting Year Calendar said. All right, I won't stand on ceremony then. Guhan gripped the sword tightly. Whether or not he could complete the quest within an hour depended on this sword. 8 minutes had passed since the start of the mission. The distance between Honest Grocery Store and the Provincial Museum was 3 kilometers. Based on the best route in the guide, it would take at least 20 minutes to get there. Both of them added up to 28 minutes, and according to Gu Han's predetermined plan, there was a budget of 30 minutes in it. From the looks of it, there seemed to be enough time left. There were still 2 minutes left, but the prerequisite was that the time to the Provincial Museum had to be within 20 minutes. This was impossible. The system would not allow this journey to be smooth sailing. According to the historical records, when Kanzu was young, he was different from the decisive, murderous, and merciful personality he had when he was at his peak. The young Kanzu was a good person who loved to help others. People called him the Fleeting Mother. When Fleeting Calendar was young, he was a good person who would not hesitate to jump out to help anyone who was hurt or wronged. He would not consider the reality of the situation, and he would help others with his cunning nature. In a stable society, this might have been praiseworthy, but in the post-apocalyptic world, it was a cancer that would harm others and himself. It was one thing for Fleeting Time to fall into Fleeting Time's trap, but many of Fleeting Time's friends were also tricked by his personality, and they lost their lives as a result. Big Brother Guhan, look, what's happening over there? Fleeting Time Calendar, who had been quietly following Guhan this entire time, suddenly stopped and pointed into the distance with a fearful expression. The thing I was worried about has finally come. Guhan sighed in his heart. Our future Kunzu Fleeting Calendar's saintly personality had finally shown itself. Following the direction of the calendar's finger, there was a woman in tattered clothes running for her life. Behind her, there was a leopard covered in gold patterns. It was chasing after her in a frenzy. Oh, it's nothing. That woman is happily playing with her pet cat. Let's not disturb them. Your mother is still waiting for us in the museum. According to the rumors on the forums, sometimes, a lie or two could solve a big problem. Is there such a big cat in the world? Fleeting Time Calendar was doubtful and hesitant. At that moment, the woman in the distance seemed to have discovered the existence of Guhan and Fleeting Time Calendar. It was as if she had seen a life-saving straw. She staggered and ran towards Guhan, shouting as she ran. Help! Help! Lord Guhan, that's not a cat, it's a leopard. Fleeting Time Calendar's intelligence was restored. Lord Guhan, we must help her. System notification, quest updated, side quest 1, lend a helping hand to Fleeting Time Calendar. Kill the leopard and save the civilians it is chasing. Please note, you can give up on the side quest, but it will affect your final dungeon rating. Alright, the system notification came, and the quest was refreshed. For the sake of an SSS rating, Guhan had no other choice but to complete this side quest. Big Brother Guhan, I'll go and attract the leopard's attention. You take your sword and hide behind the car. When the leopard leaps over the car, stab its butt with your sword. As the future savior of mankind, Fleeting Time Calendar's ability to respond to emergencies was quite good. In an instant, he had thought of a way to deal with the leopard. According to the statistics on the forums, while escorting Fleeting Time Calendar to the museum, there would be at least 1 to 3 side quests. These side quests were randomly selected from a total of 81 side quests. As such, as time went on, detailed guides for the 81 side quests were created. Some players even copied and pasted these guides together to form a collection called Fleeting Time Calendar's 81 Challenges Super Guide Collection. The leopard incident that Guhan encountered was also included in this collection. According to the strategy guide, the best way for a player to deal with the Golden Panther was to follow the Fleeting Year Calendar's instructions. This was because the Golden Panther would definitely be tempted by the Fleeting Year Calendar and give up on the woman it was chasing. Instead, it would leap over the car and attack the Fleeting Year Calendar, allowing the player to easily stab the Golden Panther in the butt. However, the leopard would not die immediately. Instead, it would angrily turn its attention to the player who stabbed it in the butt. At that time, the player would only need to take advantage of the super beginner buff and endure the leopard's attacks for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, the leopard would die due to excessive blood loss. This was the safest way to complete the quest, but Guhan did not intend to do so. He did not have 5 minutes to waste. Stay here and don't move. I'll be back soon. Guhan stopped Fleeting Time Calendar from jumping out and acting as bait. Ji Han held his sword in his hand and leaped up from the ground, charging towards the direction of the leopard. Big brother Guhan, be careful. Fleeting Time Calendar followed behind Guhan in an attempt to stop Guhan. However, he found that Guhan was surprisingly agile. With just a slight tap of his foot, Fleeting Time Calendar leaped a few meters away. In the blink of an eye, Guhan was already face to face with the leopard. Little brother, save me. Save me. The woman who was out of breath from being chased by the leopard breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Guhan standing in front of the leopard like a divine general. At least someone was willing to die for her. However, she could not afford to be complacent. She had to run as fast as possible. What if the leopard felt that one person was not enough to fill its stomach? Therefore, the woman continued to run with all her might. However, as she ran, she turned her head to see how the silly boy behind her would die. It would have been fine if she didn't look, but when she did, her eyes almost popped out of her sockets. The leopard that had been chasing him like a gust of wind and lightning suddenly stopped. It lowered its body, tightened the muscles of its limbs, and constantly uttered terrifying roars, as if it was not a weak human being in front of it, but a lion, a tiger, a well-matched opponent. Are you afraid of me? Guhan showed an impatient expression. I don't have much time left. Suddenly, Guhan moved and rushed to the leopard at a very fast speed. The leopard roared and jumped 2 meters high with its 4 limbs. Its weak waist twisted in the air, and the whole body of the leopard appeared above Guhan. A pair of shining claws were aimed at Guhan's head, and its teeth were aimed at Guhan's throat. The leopard firmly believed that its claws would crush the opponent's head in the next moment, and its bloody mouth would easily tear the human's throat. It would be able to enjoy a delicious breakfast. Unfortunately, the leopard thought too much. Although the leopard had indeed grabbed Ji Han's head and bitten his throat, Ji Han's eyes were filled with fear. In the woman's scream, Guhan did not dodge and let the leopard attack him. At the same time, the Qingpin sword in his hand crossed the leopard's belly like lightning, making an opening from the throat to the leopard's whip. The big and small fat intestines, internal organs, heart, liver, spleen, and prostate of the leopard's body, accompanied by a large amount of bright red blood, fell out of the stomach like a rainstorm. From the beginning of the attack to the present, in less than 3 seconds, the eyes of the leopard lost all the light and became a corpse. Its mouth bit Guhan's throat, like a fur coat, hanging on Guhan's body. Its teeth are still sharp. He forcefully pried open the leopard's mouth and threw its body to the ground. He glanced at the system's damage record. The moment the leopard bit Ji Han, the system's record appeared, -9,999, instant kill. Every newbie who entered the game had a standard 100 HP. In addition to the Super Novice buff, which increased HP by 100 times, Ji Han's HP was currently 10,000 HP. In other words, the 9,999 surekill damage from the Golden Panther had reduced Fleeting Calendar's HP to 1 point. If it wasn't for the Super Novice buff, the Golden Panther's attack would have killed Ji Han. By the way, the instant kill in this game did not mean that the damage would be doubled, but a true instant kill. With one hit, all of the player's HP would be emptied, and the player would die instantly. Unless there was an overpowered buff like the Super Novice buff, there was only death. Brother Guhan. Brother Guhan. Fleeting Calendar ran all the way to Guhan's side. When he saw the leopard biting Guhan's throat, he was almost scared to death. Big brother Ji Han, are you alright? I saw the leopard biting your throat. Big brother Ji Han, don't tell me you're having a sudden recovery. Fleeting Calendar said worriedly. Say something lucky. Guhan knocked on Fleeting Calendar's head. You were mistaken. The leopard did not bite my throat. Look, There's no wound on my neck at all. Guhan looked at his throat. As expected, it was clean and flawless. Thanks to his 1000x HP regeneration, Guhan's HP was restored to full in just 10 seconds. The wound on his neck had disappeared as well. Hihi, it's good that you're all right. It's good that you're all right. Fleeting Calendar chuckled as he rubbed his own head and Guhan's throat. Thank you for saving me, handsome guys. Ziyu is very grateful. A soft voice could be heard. It was the girl who came to express her gratitude. Since the leopard was killed, she no longer had any intention of running away. She walked up to them and thanked them with a soft voice. After being thanked, Ji Han and Fleeting Time Calendar took a good look at the girl's appearance for the first time. She had a slim waist and long legs. Her breasts were perky and her buttocks were perky. Her face was beautiful, and she looked mature and affectionate. You're. Fleeting Calendar cried out in surprise, "You're Ju Ziyu, the Japanese actress, Ju Ziyu. I grew up watching your movies." Hee hee. Ju Ziyu let out a hollow laugh before returning to her affectionate self. That's right. I'm that Japanese actress, Ju Ziyu. Chapter 6. Ju Ziyu felt that she was extremely unlucky. Ever since the world inexplicably entered the apocalypse, she had not had a single day of safety. First, she was held hostage by a group of bodyguards in the zoo's security room. She had to serve the needs of 5 to 6 bodyguards every day in exchange for a meager amount of animal fat. The hateful bodyguards were afraid that she would run away, so they only gave her a little bit of food every day. She felt as if she had been squeezed dry by those fellows who only had desire left. However, they weren't the only ones in the zoo. There were 3 or 4 equally fierce groups of people fighting each other for the animals in the zoo. In a moment of carelessness, they released a large group of tigers, lions, leopards, and other large carnivores that had been starved for a few days. The result was tragic. 4 of the bodyguards were bitten to death on the spot. Ju Ziyu himself was stared at by a leopard. If it weren't for the 2 young men who stood up for him on the way, Ju Ziyu estimated that he wouldn't have lived for more than a minute. Speaking of which, the man who saved her looked really good. He was no more than 20 years old, had sharp eyes, agile skills, strong muscles, and a face that was not handsome but could be called delicate. No matter how she looked at it, he looked like a man who could be relied on. Ju Ziyu had long since understood that being reserved, cold, and goddess were all bullshit. Survival was the most important thing, and the best way to survive was to find a strong man to rely on. Especially a man as handsome and skilled as Guhan. Since he was going to be F***ked anyway, why not be F***ked by Lin Feng? At least he was stronger than Lin Zitsong. Unfortunately, no matter how much she asked Guhan to protect her, Guhan did not seem to care. On the contrary, he kept telling the brat that was with him to send her back. Hey, there are lions and tigers in the zoo, okay? Big brother Guhan, did you send big sister Ju Ziyu back? Fleeting Time Calendar waited for a while and found that Guhan had returned to his side. It had only been less than a minute. Yes, I sent it back. Guhan nodded and continued to walk towards the museum. As he walked, he urged Fleeting Calendar, we need to hurry back to the museum. Your mother will be worried sick. But brother Guhan, isn't the zoo quite far from here? Why are you back so soon? Fleeting Year Calendar asked. Oh, I bumped into her agent when I turned a corner. He took Ju Ziyu home. Don't worry, Sister Ju Ziyu will definitely return home safely. Is that so? That's good. Fleeting Time Calendar was a little disappointed. After all, he had grown up watching Ju Ziyu's movies. He wanted to spend more time with her and see if she was the same in real life as in the movies. It seemed like he had a better understanding of her in the movies. Little brother Guhan, I'm really amazing. I actually killed a leopard. Did the leopard really not hurt you? Ju Ziyu continued to grumble. I'll be honest with you. There are 4 groups of people in the zoo. One of them even has a gun. It's best if we don't go back. Why don't we find a hotel and hide there? I'll treat you well. Master Guhan, let's not go back. I really don't want to go back. Why don't we go somewhere else? I'm the third-place winner of last year's Best Actress Awards. I have 32 unique skills that will definitely make you feel good. This is about it. Fleeting time calendar should not be able to see us, Guhan said as he turned a corner. By then, the two of them were already out of fleeting time calendar's sight. He can't see us? Ju Ziyu was stunned at first. Then, he thought of something and blushed. You're so annoying. Look at how anxious you are. The ground is full of stones and it's uncomfortable to lie down. How about we go to the small shop in front? No, I'm in a hurry. Guhan shook his head. Asshole. Ju Ziyu spat at Guhan. She placed her hands on her skirt and slowly pulled down her skirt, revealing the purple lace inside. I was scared to death just now. It's a little dry inside. Let me touch it for a while and get some water. Ju Ziyu's pupils dilated to the extreme before she could finish her sentence. Then, her seductive head fell from her neck. She could not understand why her feet were so close to her eyes even as she died. This is just data. Ji Han, who had just killed someone, was stunned for a few seconds. This was his first time killing someone, so he was not used to it. You are just data. Just data. I don't have time. I really don't have time. System notification. Side quest 1 completed. Killing Ju Ziyu to save time was not Ji Han's original idea. In the first few years of the game's server, those who wanted to clear the mission as quickly as possible had already done so. However, there were not many who could be like Ji Han, who could kill Ju Ziyu so cleanly. Those who entered this instance dungeon were youths who had just reached the age of 18. Faced with the temptation of a flirtatious and mature woman, none of the youths could really resist and kill her. Moreover, this game did not prohibit any mating behavior. As long as you were willing, you could mate at will, even if it was in the dungeon. Most of the newcomers came with the intention to kill Ju Ziyu. In the end, they were confused by Ju Ziyu's perky buttocks and wasted an hour or two on her belly. In the end, they even brought Ju Ziyu to the museum to complete the quest. This was a very normal situation. Anyway, there was no hope of getting an S rank, so I might as well have some fun. In fact, there were many guides on the forum such as me and Ju Ziyu fight 32 rounds. This was the reaction that a normal young man should have. Liking women and liking mating, not chopping off the other party's head with a sword. This was not the behavior of a normal person. In a sense, Guhan's personality was already half a step into the darkness. Who knew what would happen to the other half? Alright, let's not dwell on the main character's personality and continue with the dungeon. Due to the delay of 2 minutes in completing the Golden Panther quest, there was no more time left in the originally set time of half an hour. Guhan walked very quickly in an attempt to make up for the lost time. However, Fleeting Year Calendar could not keep up with Guhan's speed. I can't walk anymore. Brother Guhan. Fleeting Year Calendar can't walk anymore. After walking for about 10 minutes, Fleeting Year Calendar could no longer take it. He fell to the ground and refused to get up. After all, Fleeting Year Calendar was a little otaku who did not like exercise. Moreover, the path was flooded with ruins, and he had to pass through many obstacles. Fleeting Year Calendar's stamina was greatly depleted. You can't walk anymore? Guhan quickly returned to Fleeting Year Calendar's side and saw that Fleeting Year Calendar was pouting. I can't walk anymore. I can't walk anymore. Brother Guhan, let's rest for a while before we continue. No. It's very dangerous outside. We need to get back to the safe museum as soon as possible. Guhan firmly refused. But Brother Guhan, I really can't walk anymore. Besides, I didn't see Yuan Ku along the way except for a leopard. Fleeting Year Calendar retorted. You will see Yuan Ku soon. Guhan sighed and squatted down with his back facing Fleeting Year Calendar. Come on up, I'll carry you. No. Fleeting Year Calendar was quite tempted at the thought of not having to walk anymore. However, he still shook his head and refused. Brother Guhan, you must be tired from walking. How can I let Brother Guhan carry me? I'm in a hurry. Come on up, Guhan said. Fleeting Year Calendar was speechless. In the end, Fleeting Year Calendar still obediently lay on Guhan's back. Brother Guhan, why did you come to save me? Fleeting Year Calendar suddenly asked as he was being carried by Guhan. Because your mother saved my life. That's why I'm here to bring you to her. Oh. Brother Guhan, have you practiced swordsmanship before? I saw you kill that leopard with a single strike. It was so cool. Yes, I've practiced swordsmanship before. Guhan's voice was a little leisurely, as if he was reminiscing. I've been practicing for 10 years just for this day. For this day? Fleeting Year Calendar asked curiously, Brother Guhan, did you know that the world would fall into an apocalypse? Ever since my mother, father, and sister died, I knew. Guhan's tone suddenly changed. How could I know that the world would end? I only practiced swordsmanship so that I can protect the people I want to protect. I don't want to watch my family die like I did in the past. I'm sorry. Brother Guhan. I didn't mean to bring this up. Fleeting Year Calendar suddenly felt that this big brother of his must be carrying a lot of things on his back. Many things were very heavy, much heavier than his own body weight. We're almost there. The museum is right in front of us. The system showed that only 29 minutes had passed. At that moment, the entrance of the museum appeared in front of Guhan. This was the location of the final quest of the newbie dungeon. Brother Guhan, will you still protect Fleeting Year Calendar like you did today? Seeing that he had arrived at his destination and was about to leave Brother Guhan's strong arms, Fleeting Time Calendar felt a tinge of sadness. I will. Guhan nodded. I will in the future. Chapter 7. In a certain 3-star hotel in Yuzhong City, one of the 8 main cities of Sword Maiden Online system notification, famed Sword Instance Dungeon Breeze and Moonsword has been cleared. Rating, A rank. Please continue to work hard and break through S rank. Damn it, it's A rank again. Why are we always stuck at A rank? I'll never be able to find the keepsake of the Moonsword for the rest of my life. A plump girl pouted her lips and complained. It's fine, tranquility. We've completed all the side quests this time. We're only 5 minutes away from getting an S rank. We'll definitely get an S rank next time. The one who spoke was a mature woman in her 30s. She had a mature figure, a mature voice, and an elegant temperament. She was a mature woman that would make any mature woman addict unable to extricate themselves from her. Hey, you scoundrel, why aren't you saying anything? If it wasn't for the fact that you couldn't hold off that guy called Star Arrow, we wouldn't have wasted 5 minutes. The girl called a Ning turned around and vented her anger on a seemingly innocent, shifty-eyed fellow beside her. My dear young lady, why don't you take on the attacks of 2 silver saints by yourself? Toad, I've already tried my best. Toad explained with a bitter expression. Mph, you couldn't even handle 2 silver Saint Seiya. Back then, I thought you were really strong. You were the first man in history to clear the initial dungeon with an SS rank. What a frightening title. I even had to sacrifice my body to recruit you into my team. What a huge loss, you're useless. Hold on, young lady. It's true that I was seduced by my body, but you have to understand that the one who sold my body wasn't you. It was me, the most honorable big sister Mingyu. It has nothing to do with a washboard like you, Toad said indignantly. Enough. You two talk too much. A trace of anger and embarrassment flashed across Mingyue's face. Tranquility, don't blame Toad anymore. After all, he's a newbie who has only entered the game for less than a month. He was able to reach Ancient Sword Dreaming Souls within a month and was able to withstand the attacks of 2 Silver Saints at the same time. What else is there to blame? Toad definitely lives up to his title as the #1 player in the Yu Wang Gojian Sword Dungeon. Hihi, Big Sis is too kind, too kind. After hearing Ming Yu's praise, Toad's face turned into a chrysanthemum. However, it immediately turned into a bitter expression. But Big Sister, after today, the title of #1 will no longer belong to Toad. What do you mean? Bright Moon, who was about to drink a cup of tea, shook her wrist. Toad, what do you mean? Big Sis, what I mean is, after today, the title of #1 in King Yu's Go Gen Gen belongs to someone else. It won't belong to me anymore. The Toad snapped his fingers and a dazzling golden title appeared above his head. Yu King Go, #1 Swordsman. Holy shit. Where did such a dazzling light come from? My eyes are going to be blinded. One of the onlookers in the hotel was blinded by the light. Holy shit, am I seeing things? It's actually the title of number 1. I've played games my whole life, but I've never seen this title with my own eyes. Holy shit, this is actually the title of number 1 in the Yu Wang Gojian Sword Dreaming Souls dungeon. Didn't I hear that the owner of that title died over 100 years ago? Haven't you been looking at the forums recently? The dungeon's rating has been refreshed. An SS rank player has appeared. The one who died 100 years ago was an S rank. Naturally, the title of number 1 in the Yu Wang Gojian Sword Dreaming Souls has resurfaced. In other words, that person is the one who refreshed the dungeon. Amazing. I'm going to ask him for an autograph. Save it. I clearly saw it first. I should get an autograph first. There was a huge commotion in the hotel. Everyone was driven crazy by this dazzling title. Countless people wanted to get close to the toad and ask him to give them an autograph. A few seconds later, tens of posts were posted on the official forums. They were all posts showing off themselves and the toad. In just a few minutes, these posts had garnered a few hundred replies. They were all envious and jealous of the original poster, cursing the original poster to hurry up and die. Looking at this momentum, it was much stronger than those popular fresh meats. Hurry, accept the invitation and return to my home. Big Sis' expression changed. She brought up her own operation interface and quickly clicked a few times. The 3 of them disappeared from the hotel, leaving behind a large group of disappointed onlookers. Toad, you were too rash this time. How many times have I told you not to casually reveal your title? Can you learn from your mistakes? After returning to her home, in the living room of a standard 3-story building with more than 10 rooms, Bright Moon started lecturing the toad without holding back. Big Sis, please understand me. This is the last time I will reveal this title. After today, this title won't be mine anymore. The toad said sadly. What's going on? How do you know that after today, this title won't be yours anymore? Big Sis asked seriously. It's simple. Because someone will break my record today. That guy has been preparing for 12 years. I'm no match for him. The toad revealed a look of admiration. I'm a guy who has been rushing for a month. How can I beat a guy who has been preparing for 12 years? You're saying that someone has been preparing for this title for 12 years. Bright Moon was shocked. Doesn't this mean that he has been preparing for this title since he was 6 years old? That's unbelievable. That's right. If I hadn't grown up with that guy, I wouldn't have believed that a person could actually prepare for 12 years for an hour. To be honest, Big Sis, 90% of the cooldown for my title is due to his planning. Without his planning, I wouldn't have broken the record and gotten this title. Hey, you bastard. You're already an SS rank. What else can he do? Does he really think that there's someone in this world who can get an SSS rank evaluation? Little Miss and Ning said disdainfully. No, and Ning, if I'm not wrong, Toad's friend is probably aiming for the SSS rank title. Bright Moon's voice was very deep. How do you know, Big Sis? And Ning didn't understand. Didn't Toad say it just now? That person prepared for 12 years for an hour. Isn't an SSS rank title in an hour? Bright Moon turned to Toad. Am I right, Toad? That's right, Big Sis is Big Sis. That childhood friend of mine is aiming for the SSS rank. Today is his 18th birthday. Looking at the time, he should have entered the game by now. The corner of Toad's mouth twitched as he laughed self-deprecatingly. My title of number 1 was only lent to me by him for a month. When the month is up, it's time to return it to him. This is impossible. This is impossible. And Ning shook her head with all her might. No one can shorten the time to less than an hour. This is absolutely impossible, impossible. It takes 20 minutes to climb out of the ruins, and 20 minutes to run to Old Frank's grocery store. And there are so many troubles after that. How could he only spend an hour to finish the mission? It's true. If I told you that it would only take 30 seconds from entering the game to the entrance of Old Frank's grocery store, would you believe me? 30 seconds. And Ning was so shocked that she fell onto the sofa. She felt that her common sense had been severely overturned. That's right, 30 seconds. He found a way to shorten the time of these 2 missions to 30 seconds. I used this method to break the S-rank record and complete the mission within 2 hours. Toad looked at Bright Moon of that year and laughed helplessly. Big sis, when we first met, didn't I refuse to tell you my method no matter what? Actually, the later ones are no different from the guide. The only difference is the shortcut for the first 2 missions. I promised my friend that I would never tell anyone about this shortcut. What about the later ones? Bright Moon of that year said word by word, even if the first 2 missions only took 30 seconds, it would take at least 20 minutes to send the fleeting calendar to the museum. Especially after entering the museum, where he would have to face Yuan Ku's waves of battles, it would take at least an hour and a half. Tell me, Toad, how did your friend end the battle that lasted for an hour and a half in half an hour? I don't know. Toad waved his hands. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten an hour and 50 minutes. I asked him before, but he wasn't willing to tell me. He said that this method can only be used by people in the dark. Chapter 8. System Notice. Quest 4. Lead Fleeting Year Calendar to E-Province Museum. Quest refreshed. System Notice. Quest 5. Lead Fleeting Year Calendar to E-Province Museum's signature treasure Yu King Gojian Sword. E-Province Museum was established in 1953. It was one of the 8 national museums built by China's central government 1,000 years ago. It was a national first-class museum, a key research base of the State Administration of Cultural Relics, and a national a tourist attraction. It was also the largest, richest, and most powerful museum in E-Province. E-Province Museum was located in Wuhan's East Lake Scenic Area. It covered an area of 81,909 square meters, with a floor area of 49,611 square meters and an exhibition hall of 13,427 square meters. It was the largest museum in China for ancient musical instruments. It had over 200,000 pieces, sets, of artifacts, with bronze, lacquer, and bamboo slips being the most unique. There were 945 pieces, sets, of Grade 1 artifacts and 16 pieces, sets, of national treasures in China. There were also the 4 signature treasures, Yu King Gojian Sword, Seng Hui Chimes, Yun County Skull Fossil, and Yuan Dynasty 4 Love's Plum Vase. Such a beautiful museum was now only left with half of its walls. On the first day of Yuan Yang's invasion, a squadron of Gundams had launched a destructive attack on the museum. More than half of the area had been destroyed, and only a small portion of the building was left standing. Brother Guhan, where are we going? Fleeting Year Calendar could not help but feel a chill run down his spine as he followed Guhan into the eerie building. Let's go to the Bronze Hall, Ji Han answered briefly. Why are we going there? Because the entrance to the basement is there. Guhan blurted out, there's a pipe that leads to the basement. You'll be able to see your mother through it. Fleeting Year Calendar nodded and obediently followed behind Guhan. It did not take long for them to arrive at the Bronze Hall. It had to be said that the Bronze Hall was quite lucky. Most of the museum had been destroyed, but the Bronze Hall was the only place that remained unscathed. There were hundreds of transparent glass cabinets in the Bronze Hall. All kinds of bronze wares were neatly placed in these cabinets. There were bronze swords, bronze cauldrons, bronze mirrors, bronze musical instruments, bronze jars, and so on. However, Fleeting Time Calendar was not interested in these bronzes at all. He ran around the hall but did not find anything that looked like an entrance to the basement. He turned around to look for Ji Han, wanting to ask what was going on. However, he found Ji Han standing quietly in front of the largest glass cabinet in the middle of the hall. Ji Han did not move at all. Brother Guhan, where is the entrance you mentioned? I can't find the entrance. Hurry up and take me to see my mother. Weren't you in a hurry to bring me here? Fleeting Year Calendar urged as he held Ji Han's hand. Fleeting Calendar, do you know what's in this cabinet? Ji Han ignored the calendar's urging. Instead, he pointed at the item in the glass cabinet and asked the calendar. I don't know. How would I know what's in there? Fleeting Year Calendar shook his head without even looking at it. There's a sword in there, a famous sword. Guhan paused for a moment, before continuing, she's a famous sword, Yu King Gojen sword. That's right. The sword in there was one of China's most famous swords, the Yu King Gojen sword. It was Ji Yuhan's main objective, and the reason why he had tricked Fleeting Time into coming here was to obtain the Gojen sword of the Yu King. System notice, Quest 5. Lead Fleeting Year Calendar to the treasure of the E Province Museum Yu King Gojen Sword. Quest refreshed. System notice, Quest 6. Synchronize Fleeting Year Calendar with the Yu King Gojen Sword. Awaken the Yu King Gojen Sword into the Sword Maiden Yu King Gojen Sword. Note, the synchronization process will take 10 minutes. During this time, Fleeting Year Calendar must not take any damage. Every time he takes damage, the synchronization time will be increased by 5 minutes. System notice, Quest 7. There are 3 swords around the Yu King Gojen sword. Choose one of them as your Sword Maiden and synchronize it into the Sword Maiden Qingfeng, Sword Maiden White Iron, and Sword Maiden 100 Refining. Note, Yuan Ku's first wave of attacks will arrive in 3 minutes. Please complete the synchronization process within 3 minutes. According to historical records, 1,000 years ago, the sword ancestor Fleeting Calendar, who had been hiding in Honest Man's grocery store for 5 days, suddenly received a message from his mother near the museum. He then decided to go to the museum to find his mother. After experiencing many difficulties and troubles, he finally arrived at the museum. However, while he was looking for his mother, a group of Yuan Ku suddenly attacked the museum. Feeling despair, the sword ancestor decided to fight to the death with Yuan Zhen. Thus, he broke the display window of the King of Yu Gojen sword. The moment he touched the King of Yu Gojen sword, he began to synchronize with the famous sword, the King of Yu Gojen sword. This caused the King of Yu Gojen sword to complete its awakening and become the first sword maiden in the world. The sword ancestor Fleeting Calendar also became the world's first sword wielder. After a difficult and cruel battle with the Sword Lady, King of Yu Gojen, they finally defeated Yuan Shen, who was attacking this place. The sword ancestor naturally became the world's first human to successfully destroy Yuan Shen. The initial dungeon in the game repeated this process. The dungeon had finally reached its most crucial moment, the moment when the Yu King Gojen sword awakened. Clang! Ji Yuhan held the impoverished sword in his hand and slashed at the display window forcefully. The display window that was known as bulletproof glass shattered into pieces, and the 4 swords that were protecting the display window became easily obtainable. Fleeting Calendar, go and pick up the oldest bronze sword in the middle. Guhan ordered Fleeting Year Calendar. The bronze sword was naturally the legendary Yu King Gojen sword. Why? I don't want it. This belongs to the country, I can't touch it. Fleeting Year Calendar shook his head. He did not care about the sword that was worth hundreds of millions. He urged Guhan, Mom, big brother, hurry up and take me to my mom. Your mom is safe underground. You don't need to worry about her. Ji Yuhan pulled the Fleeting Calendar to the window of the exhibition hall and pointed at the sky in the distance. Looking in the direction of Ji Yuhan's finger, one could vaguely see some black dots on the ground approaching. Do you see that? Those black dots are a swarm of Yuan Ku, and their destination is this place. They want to kill every single survivor. They have discovered your mom's existence, and they want to kill her. That's why we must protect this place and the entrance to the underground. We cannot let those Yuan Ku harm your mom. No, they can't harm my mom. I won't allow them to harm my mom. No. No. Fleeting Year Calendar took a few steps back. Guhan, my mom isn't here. You're lying to me, aren't you? Why did you trick me into coming here? This child finally realized that there was something wrong with Big Brother Guhan. Why? To protect us humans, of course. Guhan shook his head, then nodded. He looked into Fleeting Year Calendar's eyes gently. I don't have time to explain it to you. Trust me and pick up the Yu King Gojen sword. It will explain everything to you. All right, I trust you. Fleeting Year Calendar bit his lips and quickly walked to the broken window. After taking a deep breath, he reached out with his right hand and grabbed the hilt of the Yu King Gojen sword. Synchronize, begin. An ethereal voice sounded, and the moment he touched the hilt, the Yu King Gojen sword disappeared into the window. Fleeting Year Calendar opened his mouth and looked at Guhan. He wanted to ask something, but he could not make a sound. His entire body was like a statue, frozen the moment he touched the hilt of the sword. If one were to touch Fleeting Year Calendar's body with their own hands, they would discover that the originally soft youth's body had become as hard as bronze. The Yu King Gojen sword was forged by the Yu King Gojen using all the finest copper in the world. After the sword was forged, a true dragon soared into the sky. Gojen believed that it was a sign of the destruction of Wu, so he used it as his own sword. The sword was 55.7 centimeters long, 8.4 centimeters long, and 4.6 centimeters wide. The sword's head was rolled up into a hoop shape, with 11 concentric circles separated by 0.2 millimeters. The body of the sword was covered with black diamond-shaped patterns. The front of the crossguard was inlaid with blue glass, while the back was inlaid with turquoise. The body of the sword was slender, with a middle ridge. The two sides were sharp, and the front was curved inwards. There were 2 convex hoops on the stem, and concentric circles. The body of the sword was engraved with the words, "The Yu King Ju Qian," since using the sword. After Gojen destroyed Wu, the sword became a royal treasure, and was passed down to the Yu King. However, the world changed, and the Yu Kingdom was eventually destroyed by the Chu Kingdom. The king of Chu did not like the sword, and gave it to Chu Yuan. Chu Yuan also did not like the sword, and gave it to Chu Yu. Chu Yu loved it, and wore it every day. After she died, she buried it with Chu Yu. 2,000 years later, Chu Yu's tomb was excavated by the Celestial Empire, and the Yu King Gojen sword saw the light of day again. It was kept in the Yi Province Museum until the apocalypse. Chapter 9. Sword Maiden Qingfeng, Sword Maiden White Iron, Sword Maiden 100 Refinements, Sword Maiden Green Peak, Sword Maiden White Iron, Sword Maiden 100 Refinements. The most common sword maidens in this world were the sword maidens that were most artificially forged. At the same time, they were also the first 3 sword maidens in Sword Maiden Online. Regardless of whether it was in reality or in the game, 90% of sword wielders started their life as sword wielders under the company of these 3 sword maidens. Now, Guhan needed to choose one of the Verdant Edge Sword, White Iron Sword, and 100 Refined Sword to become his first sword maiden. Choosing the first sword maiden was the most crucial and important moment in the entire dungeon. Once one was chosen, it would accompany the player for a long time until the player found an ancient sword-grade sword maiden to replace them. Guhan glanced at the 3 swords. As his eyes moved, the detailed attributes of the 3 swords appeared in Guhan's vision. Verdant Edge Sword Material, Bronze Origin, Artificial, Modern Mass Production, Realm, Sword, Unupgradable, Grade, 9th Grade, Upgradable, Sword Path, Martial Path Characteristics. Verdant Edge Sword Technique. Sword Maiden forms total damage increased by 150% per sword forms total damage increased by 200% awakening, not awakened deep sword mark, not deep damage ratio, Sword Maiden form 0, 012 sword form 0, 015 defense ratio, Sword Maiden form 0, 15 sword form 0, 18 agility ratio, Sword Maiden form 0, 109 sword form 0, 116 defense barrier reset time, 30 seconds durability, 100% synchronization sword element requirement, 0 synchronization time required, 2 minutes. Initial sword mark engraving. After synchronization, the wielder will permanently increase 100 sword element points. Sword mark contract. After synchronization, the wielder will block a fatal attack, note, only once in a lifetime. After blocking, the Verdant Edge Sword will break, and the wielder will never be able to synchronize with the sword grade sword maiden again. Awakening ability. Basic skill Verdant Edge Slash consumes 1% durability and 10 sword chi, deals 3 damage to all enemies in range. Cooldown time 3 seconds. Passive skill Everlasting Green Edge in battle recovers 1% durability every 20 seconds. When durability is lower than 70%, recovery rate doubles. When durability is lower than 30%, no longer recovers. Advanced skill, Azure Guard, defend with all your might, Increase defense ratio by 0, 18 for 9 seconds. Cooldown, 30 seconds. Ultimate skill, Green Edge Break. Durability is instantly reduced to 30%, deals 60 fixed damage to all enemies within range. Cooldown, 10 minutes. Sword Scar Restraint, Mother and Child Heart Connection. When fighting with Qingfeng Sword, innate, the effect of Qingfeng Sword technique will be increased by 30%. When fighting with the same Qingfeng Sword, innate, the effect of Qingfeng Sword technique will be increased by 50%. Assembly line. When fighting together with White Iron Sword, man-made, and 100 Refined Sword, man-made, damage ratio, defense ratio and agility ratio will all increase by 5%. When fighting together with White Iron Sword, man-made, and 100 Refined Sword, man-made, damage ratio, defense ratio and agility ratio will all increase by 10%. White Iron Sword. Material, White Iron. Origin, man-made, modern, mass production, realm, sword, unable to advance, grade, 9th, upgradable, sword Dao, Confucian Dao. Martial arts characteristics, White Iron Sword technique. All abilities increase by 110% in sword maiden form, 120% in sword form, awakened, not awakened, deep sword mark, not deep. Damage ratio, 0, 0.1 in sword mistress form, 0, 0.12 in sword form. Defense ratio, 0, 2 in sword mistress form, 0, 25 in sword form. Agility ratio, 0, 0.92 in sword mistress form, 0, 1 in sword form. Defense barrier reset time, 20 seconds. Durability, 100% sword element synchronization time, 0 synchronization time, 2 minutes. Initial sword scar carving. After synchronization, the wielder will permanently increase 100 sword element points. Sword scar contract. After synchronization, the wielder will be able to block a fatal attack. Note: only once in a lifetime. If the White Iron Sword breaks after blocking, the wielder will never be able to synchronize with the treasured sword maiden again. Awakened ability. Sad Smiley basic skill. White Iron Assertion. Consumes 1% durability and 10 sword chi every 2 seconds to deal 1 damage to all enemies in the area. Allies in the area will recover 1% durability every 30 seconds. Passive skill. White Iron Will. In battle, recovers 1% durability every 10 seconds. When the durability is lower than 80%, the recovery rate will double. When the durability is lower than 20%, it will not recover. Advanced skill. White Iron Sacrifice. Sacrifice 0, 0.1 damage ratio to increase defense ratio by 0.2. Lasts for 8 seconds. Cooldown, 50 seconds. Ultimate skill. White Iron Legend. Consumes 30% durability to increase the abilities of all sword maidens below famed swords by 10%. Cooldown, 20 minutes. Sword Scar Restraint. Mother and Child Heart Connection. When fighting together with White Iron Sword, innate, the effect of White Iron Sword technique is increased by 30%. When wielding the same sword as White Iron Sword, innate, the effect of White Iron Sword technique is increased by 50%. Assembly line. When fighting with Qingfeng Sword, man-made, and 100 Refined Sword, man-made, damage, defense and agility will all increase by 5%. When fighting with the same Qingfeng Sword, man-made, and 100 Refined Sword, man-made, damage, defense and agility will all increase by 10%. 100 Refined Sword. Material, tempered steel. Origin, man-made, modern, mass production, realm, sword, unable to advance, grade, 9th, upgradable, sword Dao, killing Dao. Martial arts specialty, 100 refinements. Sword art. Sword maiden form, total damage increased to 200%, total defense decreased to 50% per sword form, total damage increased to 300%, total defense decreased to 30%. Awakened, not awakened, deep sword mark, not deep. Damage ratio, sword mistress form 0. 0.2 sword form 0. 0.25 defense, 0. 0.5 in sword maiden form 0. 0.6 in sword form. Agility, sword maiden form 0. 1.15 sword form 0. 1.25 shield reset time, 60 seconds. Durability, 100% synchronization coordination. Sword element requirement, 0 synchronization coordination time, 2 minutes. Initial sword mark, After synchronization, the wielder will permanently increase 100 sword element points. Sword Mark Contract. After synchronization, the wielder will be able to block a fatal attack. Note: only once in a lifetime. After blocking, the 100 refined sword will break. The wielder will never be able to synchronize with the Sword Maiden. Awakened ability Sad Smiley Basic Skill 100 Refined Kill. Consumes 10% durability and 100 sword chi to deal 30 damage to a single enemy in the area. Cooldown time: 10 seconds. Passive skill 100 Refined Godly Walk. If the wielder receives any damage within 15 seconds in battle, he will automatically enter stealth state. Stealth state restores 1% durability every 30 seconds. Advanced skill Tempered Fearlessness. Cancel the shield on the wielder for 10 seconds. The moment the shield disappears, all enemies in the area will be stunned for 1 second. Note: not effective on ghost level and above Yuan Ku. Ultimate skill Tempered Lucky. Consumes 80% of the current durability and 80% of the sword chi to deal a fatal attack to a single enemy. Tiger level Yuan Ku has 80% chance of killing. Ghost level Yuan Ku has 30% chance of killing. Not effective on ghost level and above. Sword Mark Fetters Sad Smiley Mother-Child Connection. When fighting with the 100 Refined Sword, Natural, the effect of the 100 Refined Sword Art will be increased by 30%. When fighting with the 100 Refined Sword, Natural, the effect of the 100 Refined Sword Art will be increased by 50%. Assembly Line. When fighting with the White Steel Sword, Man-Made, and the Green Edge Sword, Man-Made, the damage, defense, and agility will be increased by 5%. When fighting with the White Steel Sword, Man-Made, and the Green Edge Sword, Man-Made, the damage, defense, and agility will be increased by 10%. As mentioned before, the sword element points were the most important attribute of every wielder. This attribute not only determined whether the wielder could resonate with the Sword Maiden, but also determined whether the wielder was strong or not. First, it was known as the 3 basic abilities of the Sword Maiden: damage, defense, and agility. It might not be clear what it meant at first glance, but it was very simple. It determined the value of the sword element. Take Guhan and the Green Edge Sword as an example. Assuming that Guhan had 100 sword element points, the Green Edge Sword's Sword Maiden form would have a damage ratio of 0.012. In other words, when the Sword Maiden fought in her Sword Maiden form, the damage of each strike would be 100x 0.012, which was 1.2 damage. Every strike that hit Yuan Ku would consume 1.2 of Yuan Ku's HP. On the other hand, the Guardian competition determined the strength of the protective shield on the sword wielder and the Sword Maiden. When the Sword Maiden and the sword wielder synchronized, the surface of their bodies would automatically be covered with a layer of interconnected protective shield, which was used to resist the damage caused by the Yuan Shen. The Green Edge Sword's defense ratio was 0.15, so the strength of the barrier was 100x 0.15, which was 15 points. In other words, the barrier could block 15 points of damage from Yuan Ku. Once the barrier's strength was depleted, the barrier would disappear. Yuan Ku's damage to the Sword Maiden would directly consume the Sword Maiden's durability, while Yuan Ku's damage to the wielder would directly hit the human's fragile body. At this time, the wielder was no different from a normal human. If they were hit, they would basically die. In reality, most of the deaths of the wielder were due to the barrier being broken and the physical body being destroyed. Agility, on the other hand, was a relatively broad statistic. It determined movement and attack speed, as well as dodging and blocking abilities. Moreover, there were different levels of buffs for the Sword Maiden and the wielder. When used on the Sword Maiden, movement speed equals 100x 0.109 is equal to 10.9 meters per second. Attack speed equals 10x 0.109 is equal to 1.09 sword s. Block rate equals 1x 0.109 is equal to 10.9% block rate. When used on the wielder, movement speed equals speed x 10x 0.109. Attack speed equals attack speed x 10x 0.109. Block rate equals block ability x 10x 0.109. Simply put, as long as these attributes were based on the wielder's own ability, the agility ratio would only give the wielder a 109% bonus. Apart from the three basic abilities, the value of sword essence also determined another important attribute: sword aura value. The sword aura value conversion was not as straightforward as the three major competitions. One sword essence value was equivalent to 100 sword aura. The effect of sword aura was similar to mana. Many of the Sword Maiden's skills required sword aura to be used. However, it was worth noting that sword aura could not be recovered during battle. It would only slowly recover after the battle. It would take about a day for sword aura to recover to its full value. That's right, eating could effectively increase the recovery speed of sword aura. After understanding the three major competitions and the sword aura value setting, he could basically understand the attributes of the three treasured swords. The basic attributes of each of these three treasured swords were similar. They belonged to the same level, but they all focused on different things. They belonged to the three most mainstream sword Daos of the Sword Maiden. Among them, the Azure Edge sword was a martial Dao treasure sword. It was a more comprehensive sword Dao. Its damage ratio, defense ratio, and agility ratio were all very close. It had decent damage, decent defense, and decent agility. The Azure Edge sword's martial Dao characteristics and skills were also very comprehensive. It had damage skills, defense skills, and recovery skills. It belonged to the all-rounder sword Dao. Among the three mainstream sword Daos, the martial Dao had the most sword maidens. The White Iron Sword was a Confucian treasure sword. It had high defense, low damage, and low agility. The Confucian treasure sword skills were more focused on party enhancement, area weakening, and recovery. Its low agility meant that the Confucian treasure sword's close combat ability was slightly weaker. However, its survivability was top-notch, and it could provide a lot of support for the party. This was the role of a Confucian sword wielder. Among the three mainstream sword Daos, the Confucian sword had the second most sword Daos. The 100 Refined Sword was a sword of the murderous Dao. It used almost no defense in exchange for extremely high damage and agility ratio. Stealth was their core skill. Explosive single-target damage was the reason for their existence. An unscientific shorekill attack could turn the tables in an extremely disadvantageous situation. The sword maidens of the murderous Dao were just like their names. They were sword wielders who focused on killing. They would often hide in the darkness and deal fatal damage to their enemies at the most critical moment of a battle. However, these powerful lethality were obtained by sacrificing their own defense. With a swing of the sword, it was either you die or I die. The sword maidens of the murderous Dao had the least number of sword Daos because they had the highest mortality rate. Before Guhan, every new player who reached this stage, regardless of talent, background, had to choose one of these three swords to become their first sword maiden. However, Guhan didn't have a choice. He only glanced at the Azure Edge sword, the White Iron sword, and the 100 Refined sword. He didn't need any of these three treasured swords. This was because Guhan had a better choice, one that he had planned for 12 years. Chapter 10. There were many arguments about the beginner's dungeon on the forum, but there was one thing that no player would argue about. The most difficult thing for a new player to deal with was the fleeting year calendar, which was in a synchronized state. On the third minute after the fleeting year calendar entered the synchronized state, Guhan was about to face the first wave of attacks from Yuan Ku. A wild wolf with grey fur. This wild wolf was not a demon wolf or a demon wolf with demonic power or magic power. It was just an ordinary wild wolf, a wild wolf that relied on its teeth and claws to tear its enemies apart. However, this wild wolf was not an ordinary wolf either. It was a wild wolf from the 2D world. Its true form was hidden in the gap between the 2D and 3D worlds. All 3D weapons and attacks were useless against it. Only the sword maidens could harm it. That was why the system required players to synchronize with one of the three beginner sword maidens before the attack. Only with the help of the sword maiden could they deal with the attack of the wild wolf from the 2D world. However, Guhan did not choose any of the beginner sword maidens. How was he going to deal with this wild wolf from the 2D world? Unsurprisingly, on the 35th minute of the dungeon, which was the 3rd minute after the fleeting year calendar entered the synchronized state, 2 green gems appeared in the darkness outside the exhibition hall. Along with the appearance of the gems was a mournful howl. A few seconds later, a living wolf slowly crawled into the exhibition hall. It could be seen that this wild wolf's footsteps were very relaxed. It clearly did not take the empty-handed man in front of it seriously. Who knew how many men like this it had bitten to death along the way? They were just tools it used to grind its teeth. What really made the wild wolf's heart palpitate was the cupboard behind the man and the motionless man beside it. Its animal instincts told it that there was something inside that could kill it. I'll bite this ordinary human to death first, then destroy the things inside the cupboard. Wolves were animals with great mobility. With that thought in mind, it pounced towards Guhan. According to the wolf's plan, its sharp claws would dig a hole in the man's stomach, and its bloody mouth would easily bite off the man's neck. In less than 3 seconds, the man would become a corpse full of holes. This wild wolf's idea was beautiful, but it didn't know that 10 minutes ago, there was also a leopard who had the same plan. However, that leopard didn't come from the 2D world, so this wild wolf might still have a chance. Animals are just that stupid. When they attack their opponent's vital points, they expose their own vital point. Seeing the wolf pounce foolishly at him, Guhan coldly snorted. Just like how he dealt with the leopard before, he unhesitatingly offered his throat to the wolf. At the same time, he grabbed the Qingpin sword that was hanging at his waist and stabbed it into the wolf's snow-white belly. Stupid human. Don't you know that the weapons in this world can't hurt your powerful grandpa wolf? The wild wolf was completely unbothered by Paw Sword's attack. In fact, it did not even think about twisting its body to dodge. The experience it gained from hunting over the past few days told it that the weapons in this world were completely useless against it. Not even a single hair on its body would be harmed. Just like what Guhan said, this wolf was a stupid thing. Qingpin's sword made a circle around the wild wolf's belly, and its internal organs and other things fell down like rain. This wild wolf could not understand why it died in the hands of such a weak human. Different from the corpses left behind by 3D creatures, when this wolf from the 2D world died, a space vortex appeared out of thin air. The wolf's body, along with its internal organs and blood, was sucked into the vortex and disappeared without a trace, leaving no trace, not even a drop of blood. According to human research, Yuan Ku entered the 3D world by force. Their original body, or rather, the place where they belonged, was still in the 2D world. Once they died and lost the support of their souls, they would be brought back to the original two-dimensional world by the rules between dimensions. This was only the result that humans had deduced based on data, and no one had truly proven this conjecture. As expected, it's just like what that post said, penniless sword is also half a sword maiden. Ji Han muttered to himself as he watched the wolf's carcass being cleaned up by the spatial whirlpool. No one in the world could fight against Yuan Ku without relying on a sword maiden. Even Guhan, who had the protagonist's aura and had prepared for this day for 12 years, could not do it. However, Guhan had actually killed the Yuan Ku wolf. This was because he still had the Qingpin sword, which he had obtained from the Fleeting Calendar's house. The inconspicuous sword that the Fleeting Calendar's grandmother bought for public square dancing was actually a sword maiden as well. However, Qingpin's sword was only half a sword maiden. Ever since humans forged the first sword, the world had produced hundreds of millions of swords, but in the end, only 9,678 swords were able to synchronize with humans and awaken as sword maidens. This was based on the statistics of the mass-produced sword maidens, and only the number of natural sword maidens were recorded. In the real world of the year 3001, from a certain point of view, there were 2 types of sword maidens. The first type was naturally awakened sword maidens, such as the Yu Wang Gojian sword. It originally existed in the world, and it naturally awakened the moment it came into contact with the Fleeting Calendar. The other type was artificially forged sword maidens. By relying on the template of a natural sword maiden, and with the help of some special methods, swordsmiths could artificially forge sword maidens that could awaken, such as the Azure Edge sword, the White Iron sword, and the 100 Refined sword. These were all specially forged. Humans only discovered the method of artificially forging sword maidens around 2,500 years ago. Before that, natural sword maidens were the only choice for swordsmiths. At that time, when humans sorted out the information on the naturally awakened sword maidens, they discovered that there were 3 conditions that determined whether a sword could awaken naturally. The first factor was fame. Swords that were recorded in history books, passed down by word of mouth by the masses, or existed in legendary novels had a 100% chance of awakening into a sword lady. As long as it was an authentic legendary sword, there was a 100% chance of it being awakened. The second condition was age. The older the sword, the greater the chance of awakening. For example, the swords forged during the Qin dynasty had a 70% chance of awakening as sword maidens. By the time of the Qing dynasty, only less than 1% had awakened. As for swords that were born in the 20th century, there were only 3 records of awakening. The third condition was the sword's killing intent. If a sword was neither famous nor old, it could only rely on killing to awaken. The more lives it killed, the more blood it drank, and the higher the chance of awakening naturally. For example, the most powerful sword maiden in the Path of Killing. Legend has it that she was originally the sword of a military family at the border. In the past 300 years, more than 10,000 people from different races had died at the hands of this military family. That was how this supreme existence of the Path of Killing came to be. Only when one or more of these 3 conditions were fulfilled would an ordinary sword be able to awaken naturally and become a natural sword maiden. However, there were some swords that fulfilled some of the conditions, but were not sufficient. For example, they had a bit of fame, but not many people knew about them. Some had a bit of history, but the time was too short. Some had been stained with blood, but no souls had been harvested. In addition, there were some very special conditions. For various reasons, these swords had the potential to become sword maidens. They could allow the wielder's sword essence to enter the sword, causing harm to Yuan Ku and killing him. However, they could not synchronize with the wielder and complete the awakening. Such swords were very rare, even rarer than sword maidens that could awaken naturally. They were called half-sword maidens by the majority of the wielder. Half a sword maiden was a flawed sword maiden. Their 3 basic attributes were far lower than that of a real sword maiden. Their utilization rate of sword essence was so low that it made people's hair stand on end. They couldn't create a protective barrier that could protect their wielder, and they didn't have any skills. They were only swords that could harm Yuan Yang, not a sword maiden that could transform into a girl and start an intense battle with Yuan Yang. No wielder would choose to use a half-sword maiden to fight. No one would joke around with their life. Qingpin's sword was such a half-sword maiden. A few decades ago, a wielder who used a half-sword maiden in real life entered the game for the first time and obtained Qingpin's sword. Only then did he discover this secret and post it on the forums. However, no one cared about this news, just like how no one chose to use a half-sword maiden. However, this was Guhan's most surprising discovery. It was the most crucial part of his plan. Only by relying on Qingpin's sword could Guhan defeat 6 waves of Yuan Ku without choosing to use a sword maiden. That's right, 6 waves of Yuan Ku. The lone wolf just now was just the first wave of attacks. There were still 5 waves of Yuan Ku waiting for Guhan. Chapter 11. A minute after the first wave of wolves appeared, the second wave of monsters arrived. Compared to the first wave of one wolf, the strength of the second wave was doubled. This time, there were 2 wolves. Perhaps it was because they realized that their good brothers who had arrived first were no longer around. The 2 wild wolves in the second wave were obviously much more vigilant towards the solid cold. They each occupied 2 positions on the left and right, forming a forked path as they slowly approached the solid cold. So annoying. Seeing that the 2 wolves maintained a state of high vigilance and straightened their bodies, but did not attack, Guhan's originally firm heart began to feel irritated for some reason. If you guys aren't going to attack, then I will. Guhan took a step forward, raised the Qingpin sword, and charged towards the wolf on the left. Almost at the same time that Guhan moved, the 2 wolves also moved. The wolf on the left, which was directly facing Guhan's attack, seemed to feel that Guhan was in danger, and it began to flee to its right. At the same time, Guhan did not hesitate to change his direction, and continued to close the distance between him and the wolf. Weakness. Inadvertently, Guhan had already exposed his back to the other wolf. The wolf immediately took the opportunity, and with a leap, it directly attacked Guhan's back. The so-called attack from the front and back was probably the situation that Guhan was currently facing. Unfortunately, the wolf that pounced towards Guhan's back did not know that Guhan, who had the super novice buff, did not care about any attacks. He was more concerned about the problem of time. Even if there was an extra second, it would completely destroy the plan that he had prepared for 12 years. Therefore, Guhan had to use the fastest speed to end these battles. Awoo! The wolf let out a mournful cry. Although it cunningly wanted to avoid Guhan's attack, Guhan's sword seemed to predict all of its actions. No matter how it dodged, it was unable to avoid the fatal blade. Seeing that it was about to die under the sword, the wolf's eyes revealed a frightening murderous light. It saw that its brother had already jumped behind the other party, so it decided to give up on escaping and fight with its life on the line. Even if it died under the sword in the end, it would drag this hateful man down with it. A cornered beast fighting. A trace of disdain floated in Guhan's eyes. He injected the little sword essence in his body into the Qing pin sword, and the long sword emitted a glimmer of light. Then, the tip of the sword directly pierced into the wolf's mouth, and with a flick of his wrist, the rotating and vibrating tip of the sword was immediately smashed into the wolf's internal organs, and the wolf immediately died. System notification: HP-299. The moment Guhan killed the wolf, he felt his back tighten, and then there was the feeling of his flesh being torn apart. Guhan knew that the other wolf had already pounced on his back, but it did not matter, because this was all within his calculations. The dead wolf's corpse was quickly swallowed by the spatial vortex, and the Qing pin sword that was stabbed into the wolf's body also regained its freedom. In order to get the wolf off his back, Guhan used this opportunity to lie on the ground. The wolf that originally thought that its attack had succeeded sadly discovered that it was already pressed to the ground by Guhan. It struggled with all its might, wanting to escape, but it was already too late. Guhan casually ended the wolf's life. The second wave of attacks ended just like that, and it took Guhan 15 seconds. The number of wolves in the third wave was double that of the second wave, and there were now 4 of them. When they arrived, they discovered that their companions were no longer there, and immediately became even more vigilant, but it was of no use. When Guhan attacked one of them, the other 4 thought that this was an opportunity and pounced on Guhan. After taking a bit of his HP, they were killed by Guhan. The entire process took about 20 seconds. The fourth wave had 8 wolves, and it was slightly more troublesome. It took Guhan about 30 seconds. There were 16 wild wolves in the fifth wave. Not only was there a lot of them, they were even more troublesome to deal with. This was because they were not like the previous 4 waves of wild wolves, who only targeted the solid cold. Among them, 5 wild wolves targeted the fleeting year calendar that was synchronized with each other right from the start, and they charged towards the motionless happy. If these 5 wolves had successfully damaged the calendar, or if they had just touched it, Guhan would have to spend another 5 minutes to complete the quest. This was something that Guhan could not accept. However, Guhan's 12 years of preparation was not for nothing. Most of the guides on the forums had mentioned this. From the 5th wave onwards, the wolves would directly attack the calendar. What Guhan needed to do was to find the 5 wolves with ulterior motives, and then get rid of them as soon as possible. These 5 wolves were very difficult to find, because they looked exactly the same as the other wolves. Before suddenly attacking the calendar, they did not do anything else. These 5 wolves were not difficult to find either. Their gazes were different from the other wolves, and their focus was not on Guhan. This was something that Guhan did not like. The first wild wolf with ulterior motives was at the very front of the pack. Guhan flew up and with a slash of his sword, he ended this unscrupulous fellow. Seeing that their companion was killed, the other 2 wolves howled and charged towards Guhan, wanting to cut off his legs. Guhan leapt up and escaped from the wolf's attack. The tip of his sword trembled slightly, and the second wolf was cut into 2. Seeing that 2 of their companions had been killed, the other 3 wolves felt a sense of foreboding. They howled and pounced towards the nearby calendar. However, how could Guhan allow them to do as they wished? Qingpin's sword was already waiting for them, and with one swing of his sword, the 3 wolves were sliced into pieces by Guhan while they were still in the air. Without the wolves with ulterior motives, coupled with the fact that he did not have to worry about getting injured, the remaining wolves were just a matter of time for Guhan. 40 seconds later, the 5th wave of wolves was completely wiped out. Damned rogue, how can you be so sure that your childhood friend can complete the instance dungeon within an hour? And Ning was still unable to believe that someone could obtain an SSS rank evaluation. Forget about others, is there really someone who can protect Lord Kunzu from being harmed by the 6th wave of wolves? The 5th and 6th wave had 16 and 32 wolves attacking at the same time. The average score on the forum would at least require him to be bitten 10 times, increasing the awakening time by an hour. Most people would not be able to do so, but for that fellow, it is not a big problem, as long as he is willing. Even if there were 320 wolves attacking at the same time, Lord Kunzu would not be harmed in the slightest. That is impossible, impossible. And Ning pouted. Even with Lord Yaoguang's super talent, he was still flustered when facing the 6th wave of wolves, causing Lord Kunzu to be bitten twice, increasing the awakening time by 10 minutes. How could that friend of yours allow Lord Kunzu to not be harmed in the slightest? 1. The Lord Yaoguang that Ning was talking about was the most famous and strongest sword wielder among the new generation of sword wielder. This Lord Yaoguang was not only a spirit sword wielder in the game world, but also had 4 top sword maidens. In reality, he had successfully synchronized with the famous sword, Lord Dragon Spring Sword, and became a master-level fighting strength of mankind, an existence that was less than 100 in the world, a famous sword wielder that made Yuan Ku tremble with fear. Legend has it that this Lord Yaoguang's sword element points had already broken through 50,000 points. If he worked hard, it would not be impossible for him to become a spirit sword wielder in reality. And Ning, do you know what my result was when I, the Toad, passed this round? The Toad asked. How would I know what kind of result you smelly rogue have? And Ning rolled her eyes at the Toad for free. Let me tell you, when I passed that year, I was the same as that Lord Yaoguang. I only bit twice, increasing the time by 10 minutes. Do you think my talent is as strong as that of Lord Yaoguang? How is that possible? You can't even compare to a single strand of hair of Lord Yaoguang. And Ning was very disdainful, with an expression that said you're really shameless. I feel that I can at least compare to a dozen strands of hair. The Toad muttered unhappily. Alright, I'm indeed not as good as a single strand of hair of Lord Yaoguang, but I, who is trash, was really only bitten twice. Otherwise, where do you think my SS rank evaluation came from? You're saying it as if it's true. And Ning was a little uncertain. Could it be that this smelly rogue really had the same result as Lord Yaoguang? Was his talent really as high as Lord Yaoguang's? Toad, you mean, it was your childhood friend who helped you? Big Sister Ming you had been watching from the side for a long time, and with one sentence, she pointed out the crux of the matter. Big Sister is wise, that's what I meant. The Toad looked up at the ceiling. I don't know where that childhood friend of mine learned a set of sword technique. I don't know how to describe how powerful it is. I only learned from him every day for a month, and I'm already at my current level. If I was a little more serious that month, those wild wolves wouldn't even be able to hurt Lord Kunzu. Sword technique? Ming Yu's eyes lit up. Toad, I didn't expect that you're actually a sword master. In the air, the last few space vortexes also disappeared, and it was impossible to tell that there were once 32 wild wolves squeezed into this small exhibition hall. Chapter 12. Instance Dungeon started, 42 minutes and 23 seconds, 2 minutes and 17 seconds until the calendar completion. After Ji Yuhan cleared out the entire exhibition hall, he glanced at the system time. The time taken to deal with the 6 waves of wild wolves was faster than he expected. He did not even use up the mandatory 10 minutes provided by the system, and he even had an extra 2 minutes of time. Strange, why is it that from the 3rd wave onwards, the interval between each wave is no longer 1 minute? Instead, They respawn immediately after I kill them all? Guhan vaguely felt that something was wrong. According to the information he had gathered on the forum, these wolves respawned 1 minute apart, regardless of whether you had killed all of them or not. Although it saved a lot of time than I had planned, won't this also lure out the boss, Steel Tooth, in advance? Just as this thought flashed through Guhan's mind, he felt a cold wind rushing straight at his temple. Ding! There was a heavy collision sound. Qingpin's sword appeared at the side of Guhan's temple at the last moment, blocking a sharp claw that flashed with silver light. Not bad, human. The claw that was blocked by Qingpin's sword was instantly retracted. The owner of the claw, Yuan Ku, appeared in front of Guhan. He had a human appearance but a wolf's ears and tail, black hair draped over his shoulders, and was wrapped in grey fur armor. What a powerful force! That block just now consumed 1 quark of my sword essence. Guhan's expression was a little ugly. He did not have much sword essence to begin with, only 9 quarks. He had used up about 5 quarks in the battle with the wolves, and then 1 quark just now. Now, he had less than 3 quarks left. These 3 quarks would be of great use to Guhan in the future. There were still 2 minutes before the awakening of the fleeting calendar. With so little power left, how could he deal with the final boss, Steel Tooth, that had appeared ahead of time? System prompt: Boss Steel Tooth has respawned. Yuan Ku name, Steel Tooth. Level, Phantom. Second Dimension World, Fusang Demon Realm. Entry Instance Dungeon, Yu King Gojian Jian Instance Dungeon. HP, 2 stars. Attack, 2, 5 stars. Agility, 3 stars. Demonic Power, 1 star. Ability, good at close combat. Although there is a Japanese katana hanging on his waist, he has never used it. He liked to concentrate his demonic energy in his hands and form a pair of demonic energy claws to fight with his enemies. The claws formed from demonic chi were extremely poisonous. Once someone was injured by the claws, they would be poisoned and continue to lose HP. Ultimate move, blood-breaking iron claw. Introduction: the son of the Demon Wolf Clan's patriarch. Because he was young and rebellious, he had a conflict with his father. He led his subordinates to leave the Demon Wolf Clan and form a new small clan. Although he was separated from the Demon Wolf tribe, he still enjoyed the first inheritance of the tribe and was called the Demon Wolf Young Master by all the Demon Wolf tribe members. He was also considered a role in the Fusang demon world. Steel Tooth was the first Yuan Ku to invade the 3D world. He was the first Yuan Ku to fight with Kanzu and the first Phantom Yuan Ku to die in the 3D world. Later, his father led the Demon Wolf tribe to slaughter the human world in order to avenge Steel Tooth. He fought with the young Kanzu in Shibuya for 10 days. Kanzu was seriously injured and the entire Demon Wolf tribe died. The above was the stats table of the big boss, Steel Tooth, compiled by the players on the forum based on a lot of information. It could be said that Guhan knew this opponent better than anyone else. It was because of this understanding that Guhan understood that he would be facing an absolutely tough battle. In Guhan's plan, the big boss, Steel Tooth, should not appear at this time. He should wait until the fleeting calendar was synchronized and the King of Yu Gojian sword was awakened before he could deal with him. This was because Guhan clearly knew that with his strength, he would definitely not be able to deal with the Phantom Yuan Ku. Different from the normal wild wolves of the rat level, the ghost level, which was 2 levels higher than the rat level and tiger level, was more than 100 times stronger than those wild wolves. Without the help of the King of Yu Gojian Jian, with only 3 quarks of sword essence left, there was nothing he could do. Damn it, it actually appeared in advance because of the change in the refresh rules. Sure enough, it's like the books say, plans can never keep up with changes. Guhan took a deep breath. Since the change had already happened, there was no time to regret. He had to delay the remaining 2 minutes. He could not let Steel Tooth attack the fleeting calendar. Human, you're very powerful. You actually killed all my cute tribesmen. Steel Tooth looked coldly at Guhan as if he was looking at a dead person. They are my dearest tribesmen, the future backbone of my Steel Tooth tribe. Many of them are about to transform into humans. Human, we should settle this score. These beasts all have the smell of blood on them. There are no less than 10 humans. 63 beasts means 630 humans. Steel Tooth, how do you think we should settle this score? Guhan retorted unceremoniously. 4 Yuan Ku who killed humans, Guhan would not let them live until tomorrow. Ha ha ha, this is such a boring world. You humans are like quails, unable to resist at all. It's been 3 days. I can finally play with my sharp claws. Steel Tooth laughed loudly. He was like a naughty child who had been suppressed for a long time and finally saw his favorite toy. I'll count to 3. We'll attack. Human, you have to be ready. 1, 2, 3. Just as the sound of 3 entered Guhan's ears, Steel Tooth had already appeared in front of Guhan. He moved so fast that he was not much slower than the speed of sound. You're too slow, too slow. Steel Tooth mocked Guhan. He raised his sharp claws and pressed them against Guhan's stomach. Human, I wonder how many knots do you want me to tie in your intestines? 1 more minute. Guhan grinned. What? What 1 minute? Steel Tooth was stunned. His face immediately turned ashen. Are you playing with me? Despicable human, Steel Tooth said. An ominous feeling suddenly appeared in his heart. It was as if this 1 minute was his future. In 1 minute, he would face great danger, a danger that could kill him. 1 minute. 1 second is enough to kill you. Steel Tooth no longer hesitated. He used all his strength and sent his sharp claws into the fleeting calendar's stomach. I'm in. Could it be that this human is just bluffing? Steel Tooth felt that his claws had already touched the soft and warm intestines in his opponent's stomach, as well as organs like the heart, liver, spleen, stomach, and kidneys. Steel Tooth was happy, but at the same time, he could not help but feel disappointed. This guy can kill my clansman. I thought he would be able to resist a few moves and have some fun. I didn't expect him to die so easily. If I had known, I would have saved my strength and let him play with me more. 50 more seconds. Guhan was still grinning. This human. He's not dead. Steel Tooth's ominous feeling grew when he saw Guhan still grinning strangely. I know. I heard father say that even if a human's intestines fall out, he won't die so easily. He can at least struggle for a while more. Let's see how you can still smile when I turn your organs into minced meat. Steel Tooth thought hatefully. The 5 claws that were stabbed into Guhan's stomach shot out a wave of demonic aura at the same time. With a slight tremble, the 5 waves of demonic aura mixed together and wreaked havoc in Guhan's abdomen like a huge fried dough twist drill. All his organs were turned into minced meat. He should be dead now, right? Steel Tooth heaved a sigh of relief. He raised his head, wanting to see Guhan in so much pain that he wished he was dead. However, to his horror, he discovered that Guhan was still smiling. 30 more seconds. This voice was like a death warrant, echoing in Steel Tooth's mind. I know, brain, it's brain. I have to crush his brain to shut this guy up. Steel Tooth's expression was ferocious. He wanted to pull out his claws and crush this human's brain, but the moment he moved his claws, his entire body involuntarily shivered. This human, why are his organs still there? If it wasn't for the fact that his claws were inside his opponent's body and that he was grabbing a piece of his opponent's intestines, Gongya wouldn't dare to believe that his demon power had crushed his opponent's organs into a pile of minced meat just now. Now, they had all miraculously returned. If Steel Tooth had Guhan's vision, he would have noticed that the corner of Guhan's eyes were constantly flashing with such prompts. System prompt, player military governor, you have received lethal damage minus 9,999. System prompt, player military governor, due to the novice super buff, you have retained a bit of HP. System prompt, player military governor, you have received lethal damage minus 999. System prompt, player military governor, due to the novice super buff, you have retained a bit of HP. System prompt, player military governor, you have received lethal damage minus 999. System prompt, player military governor, due to the novice super buff, you have retained a bit of HP. Is this still a human? Didn't those mysterious people tell us that the 3D world doesn't have powers that transcend nature? This guy is definitely not a normal human. Steel Tooth was afraid. Since coming to this world, this was the first time he felt fear. The last time he felt fear was when he faced that monster called Nairo. 10 more seconds. You've wasted too much time in my stomach, Steel Tooth. Chapter 13. System Notification. Yu King Gojian Sword has begun synchronizing its awakening. Famed sword-level awakening protection has been formed. Player may enter the awakening protection and wait for the birth of Yu King Gojian Sword. You're wasting your energy. Famed sword-level awakening protection will make you immune to attacks from Yuan Ku that are below the Flood Dragon level. By the way, you don't even know what the Flood Dragon level is. You're only at the Phantom level, Guhan said calmly from within an invisible barrier. The Sword Maiden needed protection at the beginning of synchronizing, but when the synchronizing reached the final stage, when the awakened Sword Maiden was ready to be born, the Sword Chi of the newborn Sword Maiden would automatically form a large barrier. Only sword bearers or sword maidens with sword essence could enter the barrier. If Yuan Ku wanted to get close, he would have to break the barrier by force. However, the barrier could block any attacks from Yuan Ku that were below the user's level. As a famed sword, Yu King Gojian Sword could ignore the attacks of Rat, Tiger, Phantom, and Soul-level Yuan Ku. Although Gongya, who was outside the protective shield, did not understand what this brat meant, he was so angry that he was about to break his own teeth from clenching them so hard that he felt like he had been tricked. It was only then that Gongya understood why the brat was counting down. The brat's goal was to stall him and not attack the unmoving brat. After the human used his abdomen to stall for 2 minutes, Gongya decided to remove his hand from the abdomen and crush the brat's head. The human suddenly leaped up at an extremely fast speed and tapped the tip of his foot on his iron claws to land beside Fleeting Year Calendar. His speed was even faster than Gongya's attack. With such speed, there was no way he would not be able to dodge Gongya's wild wolf Steel's heart. Naturally, Gang Ya would not let this human go. When he caught up to him and wanted to attack, he was forcefully blocked by an invisible barrier. Even if he used all the demon power in his body and used an ultimate move like the Blood Destruction Iron Claw, he could not break through the protection of this barrier. Is Yu King Gojian Sword about to be born? Kenzu's skin is starting to soften. Inside the barrier, Ji Yuhan no longer cared about Gang Ya, who was going crazy outside. His eyes were fixed on the Fleeting Calendar, and one of his hands was wretchedly placed on the Fleeting Calendar's bulging belly. Yes, that's right, the Fleeting Calendar's belly was bulging. When the body of the Sword Maiden touched the sword wielder, it would follow the sword essence circuit in the sword wielder's body and enter the sword wielder's purple palace. The sword wielder's sword essence would then use the sword essence of the sword wielder to give birth to the body. The whole process was actually similar to pregnancy. It would start from a small embryo. The only difference was that the pregnant person was not limited to male or female, and the speed of growth was very fast. There was no need for 10 months of pregnancy, usually 1 hour was enough. The duration was usually determined by how powerful the sword maidens were. If Guhan and the 3 beginner sword maidens were synchronized, they would only need to be pregnant for 2 minutes. His attention returned to the calendar. At that moment, after 10 minutes of gestation, the calendar's belly was already very big. It was about the size of a basketball. This was a very strange scene, because the person with the big belly was a pitiful child who was not even 14 years old, and a boy at that. Although the synchronized breeding position was a little strange, the way it was born was still relatively normal. The fully gestating sword maiden would pass through the sword wielder's purple palace and flesh and float out of the stomach like an illusory nascent soul. The moment the nascent soul came into contact with the air, it would complete the final physical manifestation and become a real sword maiden. It was not like what some people imagined, where the sword maiden was pulled out of some strange place. Normally, when the sword wielder gradually woke up from the petrified state and regained control of his body, the sword maiden would be born in less than 5 seconds. Just like now, the little finger of the calendar that had not moved all this time suddenly bent. Is it finally going to be born? Guhan, who noticed the change immediately, tensed up and gripped the hilt of the Qingpin sword tightly. Everything is for humanity. I am justice. Arrive at the honest eateries in 10 seconds. Find Kenzu in 1 minute. Convince and pack the package in 8 minutes. Arrive at the Provincial Museum in 20 minutes. Find the King of Yews, go Jian Jian and convince Kanzu to synchronize for 5 minutes. Choose the initial sword Maiden and resist 6 waves of wolves for 10 minutes. Awaken the King of Yews, go Jian Jian's final synchronized awakening for 2 minutes. If I add all of these together, it'll be 47 minutes. Back then, Mingyu tapped and drew on the virtual screen floating in front of her. Very soon, a complete table that reflected the duration of the mission appeared. These are all the optimized times. If your childhood friend Toad didn't hide anything from you other than the trick to the final battle, this will be the time before the final battle. The difference won't be more than 1 minute. In reality, Guhan had only spent 45 minutes. Guhan had forcefully reduced the theoretical limit of the forum by 2 minutes. Of course, Mingyu did not know this. If I want to get an SSS rating, I only have 13 minutes left. Back then, Bright Moon didn't say anything. She fell into deep thought. The noisy Toad and an Ning also obediently shut their mouths, not daring to disturb Big Sis' thoughts. They didn't want to be beaten up by Big Sis, even though they were already used to it. Toad, how much time did you use to help Kanzu fight against Steel Tooth? Mingyu shook her head to clear her head. I think it was 50 minutes. I remember when I first saw the King of You, an hour had passed. Toad replied honestly. And Ning, what about you? Mingyu asked again. Hee. Boss, can you not ask me this question? Don't you know my situation? And Ning looked a little awkward. Her time was considered above average among the new players, but compared to this damn hooligan, it was a long way off. She did not want to lose face in front of this damn hooligan. I told you to say it, just say it. Mingyu glared at an Ning fiercely. It took an Ning 2 hours and 50 minutes to kill Steel Tooth. But this can't be blamed on an Ning. Who told Lord Yu to be too stupid and only know a few straightforward moves? If an Ning had done it himself, he wouldn't have needed an hour and a half. At most, 50 minutes would have been enough. An Ning was bashful as he spoke intermittently. He actually had 2 more hours than this damn hooligan. It was too embarrassing. 1 hour and 50 minutes, not bad. Most people would be worried about 4 hours. The Toad rarely praised an Ning. Damn hooligan, slap the Toad, laugh at me. An Ning did not seem to understand the encouragement in the Toad's words. Instead, she felt that he was mocking her and stepped heavily on the Toad's foot. You stepped on me. So what if I step on you? Stinking hooligan. Stinking Toad. I'll stomp you to death, I'll stomp you to death. You actually dare to laugh at me. I'll stomp you to death. And Ning continued to step on him relentlessly. Enough, do you want to spar with me? Then all of you, quiet down. The 2 of them were so noisy that Mingyu's head was about to explode. She immediately berated them. Yes, Big Sis. Yes, Big Sis. The 2 of them became obedient once again. I used an hour. That year, Mingyu muttered to herself, Toad, tell me, what's the difficulty of the final battle? Difficult. The Toad thought for a moment. Just like what an Ning said just now, it's because the Queen of You is too clumsy. After the Queen of You awakened, she seemed to have completely lost her inherited sword technique. Although she had a famous sword level attack and sword chi, her moves were even worse than an ordinary person's. Fighting was like drawing, and facing Steel Tooth, who was known for his agility, it was difficult to even touch the corner of his clothes. That's right, the Queen of You has the power of a famous sword, but her attack is even more immature than a child's. I'm afraid that only a dead object can stab him. Back then, I followed the strategy on the forum and risked my life again and again. I let Ching Feng attack Steel Tooth's feet, reducing his movement speed to a level that I could keep up with. Then, I used my own body to entangle Steel Tooth, allowing the Queen of You to attack Steel Tooth, and finally killed him. Toad and Ning, did you guys do the same? That's right. That stinking Steel Tooth was too fast, and Bai Tai's speed wasn't as fast as Ching Feng's. In the end, I made Bai Tai close his eyes and randomly slash, but he was hit by a lot of swords, and it took me 4 hours. Big Sis, you're the best, you finished it in an hour. Wait. Didn't you just say that you only spent 2? Cough cough. Don't stare at me like that, I don't know anything. The toad coughed. It's all thanks to practicing sword techniques with my childhood friend for a month. I simply let Ching Feng transform into a sword form and went up to fight randomly. My luck is actually not bad, I'm 10 minutes faster than Big Sis. This has nothing to do with luck, it's because of your ability, Toad. Even Lord Yaoguang spent an hour to defeat Steel Tooth. Toad, if you have the chance, let Chiu Yu transform into her sword form and fight. I want to see your true strength. Yes, Big Sis. The Toad smiled bitterly. Ever since the first dungeon, he hadn't practiced any sword techniques. It seemed like he would have to return to his bitter days in the future. Toad, after saying so much, I'm more and more curious. Just how superb is your childhood friend's sword technique to be able to finish off Steel Tooth in 13 minutes? In this world, the Swordmaster is a rare creature. The moon of that year paused, her face filled with seriousness and excitement. As far as I know, in this world, there are no more than 2 sword masters who can reach that level with just their sword techniques, and all of them are old bones. Chapter 14. Don't hesitate any longer. The future of humanity needs you. This is just a bunch of data, not the real Kanzu. Guhan, you are the righteous one. Fleeting Year Calendar's belly began to glow, and his eyelids began to tremble. This was a sign that the awakening was about to be completed. He did not have a single second to waste. Lord Kanzu, I'm sorry. Guhan's face contorted. He raised the Qingpin sword in his hand and slashed at Fleeting Year Calendar's belly with the speed of a meteor. Blood spurted out from Fleeting Year Calendar's belly like a fountain. Just like that, Guhan cut open Fleeting Year Calendar's belly. The King of Yu's Gojian sword had to be fully supplied with sword essences by the wielder. Even if the sword essences were cut off a second before the awakening succeeded, the sword maiden would immediately stop the awakening. Just like now, the Fleeting Year Calendar's belly, which was originally shining with a bright light, had completely dimmed. The awakening barrier that had always been there also began to tremble strangely. Why? Big brother Guhan. Why? The pain in Fleeting Year Calendar's abdomen jolted him out of his petrified state. He looked at the blood-stained Qingpin sword and his own belly, which was still gushing out blood. With great difficulty, he asked, "What is it?" "Goodbye, Lord Kanzu." Guhan did not dare to look Fleeting Year Calendar in the eye. He quickly crouched down and reached his hand into Fleeting Year Calendar's abdomen. He pulled out a purple orb of light from within. A baby could be vaguely seen within it. This was the nascent soul of the Sword of Yu King Gojian, which was Guhan's initial goal in the dungeon. Big brother Guhan, you must have your own difficulties. Fleeting Year Calendar, I don't blame you. It's just that. I want to see my mother. After saying that, Fleeting Year Calendar's pupils shrank, and he lost all signs of life. Lord Kanzu, who was supposed to fight to the end in the dungeon, died just like that. He died in the hands of a man whom he had only known for less than an hour, a man whom he trusted immensely. Hee. It's just a bunch of data. It's just a bunch of data. Guhan repeated those words over and over again. Even though this Kanzu was just a bunch of data, even though he had planned this countless times, and even though Guhan thought his heart was as hard as stone, Guhan still felt a sharp pain in his heart. He knew that of the 2 off of light and darkness in his soul, he was one step closer to the cold and darkness. Light is justice, darkness is justice, justice is me, I am justice. With those words, Guhan ended the struggle in his heart. There was still one more step to his plan. If this step was not achieved, then everything he had done in the past 12 years would have been a waste of time. When Guhan's father was still alive, he once told Guhan that his family was once an amazing family. His family inherited the bloodline of an invincible emperor-tier swordsman. His ancestor had once reached an agreement with the King of Yu's Gojian sword. In other words, as long as Guhan had enough sword elements, Guhan would be able to reach an agreement with the King of Yu's Gojian sword, just like Kanzu Fleeting Year Calendar. Originally, Guhan thought that this was just his father's nonsense. After all, Which Emperor swordsman's bloodline did not stand proudly at the peak of the human world and become a top-notch family with great power and status? How could they be like him, staying in a densely packed low-rent house like a beehive provided for free by the government, eating free synthetic peas every day, and his sister's biggest wish at the age of 5 was to taste a bite of natural beef? This wish was so lowly, so far out of reach. Which Emperor family would have such a lowly wish? However, one day, when Guhan was sorting out his parents' belongings, he found a book. This was a real book. It was not an electronic code hidden in a USB drive, but a real book printed on paper. This book had no name, no annotations, and even the first 50 and last 50 pages were empty. Only the 30 pages in the middle recorded something. It recorded a few sets of sword techniques, a few ultimate skills, and a few shady techniques. The sword maiden grafting technique was one of those shady techniques. It was a technique that could not be found in any public information. It was a technique that could deprive the nascent soul of a sword maiden that had just completed synchronization and was about to be awakened. When he first saw the sword maiden grafting technique, Guhan's heart thumped wildly. This was because the benefits of this technique were too crazy. Even an Emperor expert would lose his mind if he saw this technique. Firstly, this technique did not limit the sword maiden's level. As long as one had the ability to control a strong person who was synchronized and obtained the nascent soul of the sword maiden, one would be able to possess the sword maiden, regardless of one's own ability or the sword maiden's level. Even if one only had one sword essence and the other party was an Emperor sword maiden, one would still be able to possess her. This was like a beggar possessing a country in an instant. Secondly, the grafted sword lady was the same as the sword lady that was nurtured. It could increase the sword wielder's acquired sword essence by the same amount as the sword essence required for synchronization. For example, synchronization with the Yu King Gojian sword required at least 10,000 quarks of sword essence. After a successful grafting, the solid Han would immediately increase the acquired sword essence by 10,000 quarks. In this way, with only 9 quarks of sword essence, the solid Han that was far from an ancient sword rank sword wielder could instantly become a famed sword rank sword wielder without any difficulty. Thirdly, this technique was not limited by the number of sword maidens. When a sword wielder's total sword essence exceeded a certain level, they could become a stronger sword wielder. 100 quarks of sword essence was the level of an ancient sword, 1,000 was the level of a treasured sword, 10,000 was the level of a renowned sword, 100,000 was the level of a spiritual sword, and above that were the level of an immortal sword and an emperor sword. Every time a sword wielder broke through a level, they would have one more sword maiden that they could synchronize with. For example, a sword wielder at the level of a renowned sword could only have 3 sword maidens. It could only be one less, not more. This had become a truth that no sword wielder had ever been able to break. However, the sword maiden grafting technique had broken this truth. A forcefully grafted sword maiden would not be able to form a sword mark in the body, so it would not take up the precious sword maiden quota of a sword wielder. When a sword wielder of the same level fought with Yuan Ku, an extra sword maiden was equivalent to an extra life. No sword wielder could resist such a temptation. It was such a sinister and vicious technique with unparalleled battle power. One could imagine that once this technique was made public, it would definitely cause chaos in the world. Countless sword wielder would harm their own kind in order to increase their own strength and take their sword maiden's nascent souls. The friendly atmosphere in the human world might be completely destroyed because of this. This was a complete disaster. The sword maiden grafting technique was very powerful, but it had a lot of restrictions. Firstly, the sword maiden grafting technique could only be used once, and it was best if it had never synchronized with a sword maiden before. This was because there would be no interference from other sword maidens' sword marks, and there would be fewer hidden dangers. Secondly, the sword maiden grafting technique's target sword maiden had to be compatible with the user's bloodline. In other words, the ancestor had synchronized with the sword maiden before. Otherwise, it would either fail or die from the backlash. Lastly, the sword maiden grafting technique was to obtain a sword maiden through trickery. Such a sword maiden would not be able to form a sword mark in the body, and the sword wielder would not be able to carve a sword mark in the body to increase the sword maiden's grade. As a result, The grafted Sword Maiden would be born as a 9th-grade Sword Maiden. Compared to a 1st-grade Sword Maiden through carving a sword mark in the body, the difference in strength was more than 3 times. The Sword Maiden grafting technique had its pros and cons, but in general, the pros far outweighed the cons. It seemed that no one could refuse such a technique and refuse to use it in the real world to increase their strength. Other things aside, as long as Guhan used it in the real world, even if it was just by grafting an ancient sword-grade Sword Maiden, he would instantly realize his dream of becoming a great sword wielder. However, Guhan had never thought of using such a vicious technique. Instead, he planned to bury it in the dust, just like his father. He did not have enough innate sword elements and could not become a sword wielder, but he had always kept this technique a secret. He did not regret it even after he died at the hands of Yuan Ku. However, gradually, his determination to become a sword wielder prevailed, especially when he learned that the growth of his innate sword elements was far below average. It was impossible for him to reach 100 quarks before the age of 18. In the end, Guhan could not suppress his desire and impulse. However, he warned himself that the Sword Maiden grafting technique could only be used in the game. As long as he achieved the Sword Maiden grafting technique in the game, the 10,000 innate sword elements from grafting Gojian Sword of the King of Yu would not only allow him to instantly become a famed sword wielder in the game, but he would also be able to increase his acquired innate sword elements by 90 quarks according to the 0.9% conversion rate. With that, he would only be 1 quark away from his lowest goal of 100 quarks. His dream of becoming a sword wielder in the real world would only be a step away. What happened next was just like what we know. 12 years ago, Guhan made up his mind to snatch and graft Gojian Sword of the King of Yu. In the end, he obtained Gojian Sword of the King of Yu's nascent soul. According to the steps of the Sword Maiden grafting technique, Guhan only needed to inject the innate sword elements in his body into the nascent soul to make up for the last quark of innate sword elements needed for the awakening. Then, the grafting technique would be completed and he would obtain this famed Sword Maiden. However, there was a precondition. Guhan's father did not lie to Guhan. Guhan did have the bloodline of an overlord-level sword wielder in his body. Or, at the very least, he had the bloodline of a famed sword wielder who had synchronized with Gojian Sword of the King of Yu. If Guhan's father was lying and spouting nonsense, then Guhan's 12 years of hard work would be gone with the wind, leaving behind nothing but a joke. Guhan had no choice but to take a gamble. He felt the quark of innate sword elements in his body slowly enter the nascent soul through his palm. In the next moment, a dazzling light shone. The nascent soul in the palm of his hand blossomed like a purple lotus. First, it was a pair of slender jade feet, then a pair of slender straight legs, a perfectly curved waist, a plump chest, and finally a cold face. That's right, it was exactly the same as the picture on the forum. This was the powerful famed Sword Maiden, the first Sword Maiden to awaken in the world, famed sword, Gojian Sword of the King of Yu. Did you murder my master? Sword wielder. The Queen of Yu, whose body had already taken form, slowly descended to the ground. She pointed the sword in her hand at Guhan's heart. System notification, Quest 6, synchronize the fleeting calendar with Gojian Sword of the King of Yu and awaken Gojian Sword of the King of Yu into a Sword Maiden, Gojian Sword of the King of Yu completed. System notification, Quest refreshed. Quest 8, kill the final boss, Ghost Realm Yuan Ku, Steel Tooth. Chapter 15. You knew. Seeing the sword aimed at his heart, Guhan was a little surprised, but only a little. Do you think I didn't feel anything when I was at Nascent Soul? Sword Lady Yu Wang's sword was already on Guhan's flesh. I'm going to kill you and offer you as a sacrifice to Lord Fleeting Calendar's spirit in heaven. I'm very sorry about Fleeting Calendar's death. I had no choice, I'm sorry. Guhan lowered his head and apologized sincerely. In our Yu country, there's no need to apologize. Go die. With that, Sword Lady Yu Wang released a huge and vigorous killing intent. Her anger seemed to condense on her sword. With boundless hatred, Sword Lady Yu Wang stabbed down mercilessly. Ah! Sword Lady Yu Wang cried out. Her sword seemed to have stabbed into an indestructible iron plate. The sword, which was filled with all her strength, bent into the shape of an arch bridge. In the next second, she was pushed back by the counterforce like a spring. She crashed heavily into the awakening barrier, causing the already shaky barrier to shatter and disappear. Why is it like this? Why can't I kill you? Sword Lady Yu Wang crawled up from the ground, her face full of confusion and doubt. That's normal. Sword Lady can't hurt her sword wielder, even if the sword wielder used despicable means to obtain her. Guhan walked to Sword Lady Yu Wang's side and extended his right hand. I'm Guhan, I'm your sword wielder. Scram. Sword Lady Yu Wang flung away Guhan's hand, indicating that she would never submit to a despicable person like Guhan. Hey, aren't you two a little too cowardly? Gongya, who had long given up on breaking the protective shield and chose to watch a melodramatic 8 o'clock TV series outside, finally could not tolerate being ignored any longer and made a sound. Although I don't know where this woman came from, she looks even prettier than my beloved Ji Wei. Ha ha ha, I declare that this woman belongs to me from now on. Wolves were lustful by nature. This was the logic of perverts. What's more, Gongya was a wolf demon. Impudent, how dare you blaspheme this queen? Sword Lady King Yu's anger towards Gang Ya instantly shifted to Ji Yu Han. She immediately gave up on attacking Ji Yu Han and turned to brandish King Yu's Gojian sword, charging towards Gang Ya who was courting death. However, no matter how one looked at it, this sword dance technique was even worse than a kindergartner's. Hey, woman, what sword technique is this? Are you dancing for me? With a light leap, Gongya dodged Sword Lady Yu Wang's soft sword and mocked her with a smile. Go to hell. Sword Lady Yu Wang's face turned red. She looked in Gongya's direction and swung her sword again. This time, Gongya didn't dodge anymore. This was because there was no need to do so. This sword couldn't touch Gongya's body at all and directly slashed past Gongya's arm. Woman, your dance is so beautiful. Gongya, who didn't need to dodge, pinched Sword Lady Yu Wang's cheek and felt an astonishing smoothness. Haha, it feels good. I can't bear to part with you anymore. Gongya laughed loudly and dodged effortlessly again, perfectly dodging Sword Lady Yu Wang's attack. However, Gongya gradually became nervous. Although the sword didn't touch him, even the sword chi it brought felt like it was about to tear his skin apart. If he really got hit by the sword, he might not be able to get away with it. Woman, are you tired? If you're tired, put down the sword and let me touch it for you. These were Gongya's heartfelt words. Unfortunately, when Sword Lady Yu Wang heard this, she swung her sword even harder. Hey, woman, let me negotiate with you. If you give me your sword, I'll help you kill that man. How about it? Didn't he just kill your mother? I'll help you take revenge, how about it? Gongya didn't know much and didn't know that men could have big bellies. As a result, he mistook the fleeting calendar for Sword Lady Yu Wang's mother. Damn woman, I'm not going to play with you anymore. After dodging dozens of attacks from Sword Lady Yu Wang, Gongya finally lost all his patience. He turned to the side and found Sword Lady Yu Wang's weakness. He kicked her in the stomach and sent her flying more than 10 meters away. She landed right beside Guhan, who had been standing there watching the show. Yu Wang, you're no match for Gongya. Let me help you. Guhan reached out to grab Sword Lady Yu Wang's pair of jade discs, wanting to help her up. Don't touch this king will kill you later. Sword Lady Yu Wang shook off Guhan's hand and stared at Gongya who had just kicked her away. Ha ha ha, woman, just like this man said, you're no match for this lord. Get out of the way, let this lord kill this man and avenge your mother. In Gongya's heart, Guhan's hatred was far greater than Sword Lady Yu Wang's. If this king wants to kill you, it's as easy as flipping my hand. Sword Lady Yu Wang said ruthlessly. She raised King Yu Gojian and was about to kill Gongya again. However, this time, she didn't take a step forward. A hand pressed down on her shoulder. This hand clearly didn't have much strength, but it made her unable to move. King Yu, I only have 5 minutes left. I can't waste any more time for you. Return to the sword. Return to the sword. King Yu's expression froze, and his face instantly turned red. Don't even think about it. Sorry, then I'll have to do it myself. After Guhan finished speaking, his other hand pressed against Sword Lady Yu Wang's exposed, smooth back. "How dare you? Take your hand away from this king's noble body." Sword Lady Yu Wang panicked, completely panicked. "Stop, how can this king return to the sword in your hands?" "H, fool, fool, if you can't find this king's sword hilt, don't even think about making this king return to the sword." Sword Lady Yu Wang sneered a few times, as if she could cover up the panic in her heart. The so-called returning to the sword was to transform the human form of the sword lady back into a sword form and hold it in the hands of the sword wielder to fight. Normally, the sword lady would take the initiative to return to the sword. Under the command of the sword wielder, the sword lady would automatically return to the sword and appear in the hands of the sword wielder. However, the sword lady could also refuse to return to the sword. This way, the sword wielder would have to find the sword hilt in the sword lady's body. As long as the sword wielder held the sword lady's sword hilt, he could force the sword lady to return to the sword. "I remember, it's between the 24th vertebra and the first tailbone." Gu Han's hand moved down the sword lady Yu Wang's back and finally stopped between her legs. It was less than a few centimeters away from her chrysanthemum, that embarrassing place. "It's here." No wonder Sword Lady Yu Wang wouldn't let Gu Han find her sword hilt. Emotions were at such a sensitive place. "This king will definitely kill you." King Yu, whose face was about to bleed, threatened. "As you wish," Gu Han replied indifferently. His fingers pressed down between King Yu Wang's thighs. A cold, historical sword hilt appeared in Gu Han's hand. Gu Han held the sword hilt and slowly pulled it out from between King Yu Wang's buttocks. As the sword was pulled out, King Yu's body became smaller and smaller. Finally, it disappeared, leaving behind a long sword that shone with a cold light. This was the sword form of King Yu Wang, King Yu Gojian sword. "Human, what sorcery did you use just now?" That woman was actually turned into a sword by you. Gangya, who was planning to laugh and watch the fight, suddenly realized that the atmosphere wasn't right. The plot seemed to have deviated from his expectations. "You don't need to know. Gangya, you won't live for more than 5 seconds." Gu Han looked at Gangya like he was looking at a corpse. "Hee, human, watch me crush your head." For some reason, seeing the human's cold gaze, Gangya's heart was filled with fear. In order to suppress this fear, he exploded with the most powerful beast power he could muster. With a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, he charged at Gu Han. Blood destruction metal claw. The moment Gang Ya attacked, he used his strongest move. The blood-red iron claws that were filled with demonic power could tear apart anything. It was so strong that it could tear apart everything. 9 swords of mysterious heaven, abyssal sword. Sword light flashed in the air and more than 10 sword energies suddenly appeared. They danced in the air like silver snakes and accurately stabbed into Gangya's forehead. This ghost-level Yuan Ku, the young master of wolf race, didn't even have time to react before his soul was pierced. His life quietly disappeared from this seemingly fragile world. Release, King Yu. After killing Gangya, Gu Han threw King Yu's Gojian sword into the air. The body of the sword twisted and Sword Lady Yu King transformation returned to her sword lady form. She stood on the ground. "What sword technique did you use just now?" For the first time, King Yu's face didn't show any anger towards Gu Han. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. This is a sword technique passed down in my family. A very powerful sword technique. It's stronger than any sword technique I've seen before. Sword Lady Yu King's words were filled with envy. "Do you want to learn? I'll teach you." Gu Han smiled. This was the first time he truly smiled since entering the dungeon. Chapter 16. System prompt, quest updated. 7th quest, kill the final boss, Ghost Class Yuan Ku, Steel Tooth completed. System prompt, instance dungeon updated. 7th quest completed. King of Yu instance dungeon cleared. The instance dungeon space will automatically close in 30 seconds. Player, military governor, can click the return button at the bottom right corner of your line of sight to return to the instance dungeon settlement center. You can also wait for 30 seconds to force yourself to return to the settlement center. I'm leaving. Guhan walked to Sword Maiden's side. You're leaving? Sword Maiden's face revealed a look of surprise and reluctance. You despicable person, didn't you say you would teach me the 9 swords of mysterious heaven? I will. When you wake up, I will teach you. However, by then, you will have forgotten about me. Settlement Center. This was probably the favorite place of every Sword Maiden online player. That was because this was the place to calculate the results of a battle, calculate the evaluation points and receive the rewards. To the gamers, there was nothing more blissful than sitting on the soft, comfortable sofa in the settlement center, sipping on a slightly bitter coffee, enjoying the beautiful scenery that could only be seen in the settlement center, and enjoying the bountiful rewards flowing into their pockets. Apart from the rewards, the most memorable thing about the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center was its ever-changing scenery. Since the Great Destruction, humans had lost almost all of their land and could only live in the 8 base cities. Many of the scenery had become legendary. For example, the sea, this majestic world formed by water, had become a scenery that only existed in textbooks and games. 99% of humans had never seen the real sea in their entire lives. Thus, in order to make up for the regrets of many people, the settlement center had completely simulated the scenery that only existed in legends. The theme of the scenery would change every 3 days, making many players unwilling to leave this beautiful settlement center. Today's theme was Jurassic Park. The players felt as if they had arrived in a world hundreds of millions of years ago. There were salo trees that were dozens of meters tall, wild grasses that were several meters tall, mosquitoes the size of mice constantly flew by, and gigantic giraffes appeared and disappeared from time to time in the distance. Guhan had appeared in such a beautiful world. However, there were 2 dark green leather sofas and a transparent glass coffee table placed under the salar trees, greatly destroying the harmony of this world. Hello, Settlement Agent 0791, at your service. A beautiful office lady was already sitting on the sofa. She wore a dark blue business suit and black stockings. She was a very attractive office lady. Please do not have any ill intentions towards her. This was not a real quest, nor was she a real player. She was an NPC automatically generated by the system. Hello, player military governor, your Dungeon King Yu Gojian Gen data has been calculated. Do you wish to begin settlement? You can also choose to enjoy the scenery here. Our settlement center's theme today is Jurassic Park. Seeing Guhan sitting on the sofa, Settlement Agent 0791 took the initiative. No need. Let's start the settlement, Guhan replied. Main Mission 1 has been completed, Main Mission 2 has been completed. Main Mission 6 has an abnormal status, Main Mission 7 has been completed, Side Mission has been completed, total time spent, 56 minutes 37 seconds. Warning. Warning. The 6th main mission status was abnormal. The 6th main mission status was abnormal. Anomaly code 000009, anomaly level S, Area Intelligent Processing Server's authority level is lower than the anomaly level, reporting to the Core Intelligent Processing Server. Please wait patiently, estimated processing time, 5 minutes. The 6th main mission was for Guhan to choose between the Azure Sharp Sword, the White Iron Sword, and the 100 Refined Sword to become the first Sword Lady. In order to graft the Go-Gen Sword of Yu, Guhan gave up on the choice. Even after the Instance Dungeon ended, he did not choose one of them. This was the first time in the entire history of Sword Maiden Online. Accountant 0791 had been doing settlement for hundreds of years, but this was the first time she had encountered such an anomaly. Her AI processing server was not qualified to handle this anomaly, so she had no choice but to report it to a higher-level AI processing server. In a room filled with dolls, a lowly girl with cute ponytails was happily playing with her beloved Angora rabbit, Tai-Bai. Tai-Bai, an anomaly has been reported. The little lowly placed the Angora rabbit on her head, and a red light flashed in her eyes. She was reading the data that was reported to her. Anomaly 000009, the first Sword Lady was not selected. The Go-Gen Sword of Yu Instance Dungeon has been completed. The lowly's lips curled into a strange smile. Seems like something interesting has happened. Tai-Bai, I'll be right back. After saying this, The lowly disappeared from the room, leaving behind the disappointed Angora rabbit, Taibai. You're the player who caused the anomaly 000009? Accountant 0791, who had been in a daze, finally spoke. That's right, it's me. Guhan nodded. He felt that this accountant 0791 was a lot stranger than before. I've seen the recording of your dungeon. To be honest, I was shocked. You actually took away the Go-Gen sword of Yu King. This is very difficult for me. Mr. Military Governor, I don't know how to deal with this problem. Accountant 0791 spread her hands, expressing her helplessness. Looks like Miss 0791 has changed. Has my little problem alarmed Master Bat? From the tone of the other party's voice, Guhan knew that the person sitting in front of him was not an NPC. At the very least, it was an AI with advanced AI. No, definitely not. 0791 quickly waved her hands. Your problem is not worthy of Master Bat to deal with. I am Sword Maiden Online System Coordinator Number 3, also known as the GM. The system coordinator belonged to Sword Maiden Online System Coordination Department. It was one of the few departments in Sword Maiden Online that was made up of real people. Their main responsibility was to supervise the operation of the game and coordinate the communication between the main AI bat and humans. In terms of function, they did not have the authority to change or deal with the game's data. They were not the traditional GM. However, by communicating with Bat, they could indirectly deal with special situations. Therefore, they were still given the title of GM by the majority of players. I see. Then Mr. GM number 3, how do you think this anomaly should be dealt with? Guhan's tone was calm. The situation was within his expectations. Even without this anomaly 000009, the grafting of the Go-Gen sword of Yu King would definitely attract the attention of the GM. It was expected that the GM would personally come out to negotiate. Are you going to deny my dungeon results? Guhan probed. To Guhan, this was the worst-case scenario. If he denied everything, it would be like drawing water with a sieve. Of course not. Your dungeon results are real and valid. You did not use any cheating methods. Unless Master Bat says so, we have no right to deny your dungeon results. The GM's answer made Guhan heave a sigh of relief. It was good that the GM did not deny his dungeon results. However, the way you obtained the Go-Gen sword of Yu King has broken the conscience and bottom line of humans. Our coordination department believes that you should cancel your Go-Gen sword of Yu King. However, your dungeon evaluation can be retained. The other rewards will remain the same. You will also be allowed to choose one of the 3 original sword maidens. What did you say? Guhan slammed the table and stood up. You want to cancel my Go-Gen sword of Yu King? This is the original sword maiden that I obtained through normal and reasonable means. What right do you have to cancel my original sword maiden? Calm down, Mr. Military Governor. GM03 shook his head. This is the unanimous opinion of our coordination department. You have to know that the way you obtained the Go-Gen sword of Yu King has broken the bottom line of humans. If I wasn't working right now, I would really want to beat you up. I protest. Your decision goes against the basic rules of the game. I want to complain to Bat's core intelligence. You have no right to take away my original sword maiden. You are abusing your authority. Guhan had studied the basic rules of the game for 12 years. He was very sure that this coordination department had no right to take away his spoils of war. That's right, we do not have the right. But what if this is the decision of Master Bat? GM03 smiled. I'm leaving. Have a good game. Accountant 0791, at your service. Anomaly 000009 has been dealt with. Result, Mission 6 completed. The sword maiden that you obtained from the mission, Go-Gen sword of Yu King, is in a frozen state. You have a chance to choose another original sword maiden. Commencing battle record evaluation, main mission completed, side mission completed, time elapsed, 56 minutes and 37 seconds. Your dungeon evaluation, SSS. Congratulations, You have broken the lowest time elapsed in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. You have obtained 100 reputation points. You have obtained achievement, 1 hour. Your name will spread throughout the world. Congratulations, you have broken the highest dungeon evaluation in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. You have obtained 100 reputation points. You have obtained the title, the first person Go Gen Sword of Yu King. You stand at the peak of history. Your name will spread throughout the world. Ding dong, system notification, broadcast to all channels. Player military governor has broken the lowest time elapsed in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. The original record of 1 hour 50 minutes 38 seconds has been broken. The new record is 56 minutes 37 seconds. Let me congratulate player military governor. He has created a new era. Ding dong, system notification, broadcast to all channels. Player military governor has broken the lowest time elapsed in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. The original record of 1 hour 50 minutes 38 seconds has been broken. The new record is 56 minutes 37 seconds. Let me congratulate player military governor. He has created a new era. Ding dong, system notification, broadcast to all channels. Player military governor has broken the lowest time elapsed in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. The original record of 1 hour 50 minutes 38 seconds has been broken. The new record is 56 minutes 37 seconds. Let me congratulate player military governor. He has created a new era. Ding dong, system notification, broadcast to all channels. Player military governor has broken the highest dungeon evaluation in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. The original record of SS has been broken. The new record is SSS. Let me congratulate player military governor. He has created a new era. Ding dong, system notification, broadcast to all channels. Player military governor has broken the highest dungeon evaluation in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. The original record of SS has been broken. The new record is SSS. Let me congratulate player military governor. He has created a new era. Ding dong, system notification, broadcast to all channels. Player military governor has broken the highest dungeon evaluation in the dungeon Go Gen Sword of Yu King. The original record of SS has been broken. The new record is SSS. Let me congratulate player military governor. He has created a new era. Damn you, mother ***, if you have the guts, broadcast it to all channels 3,000 times. Guhan, who had never uttered a single expletive in his entire life, uttered the first expletive in his life. 12 years of hard work, all for naught. Player military governor, please do not use expletives. Guhan was surprised. He raised his head and saw that cashier 0791 was winking at him. There was a trick to this. Chapter 17. Player military governor, your dungeon rewards will now be issued. Cashier 0791 said in a serious and formal manner. First, the basic rewards for completing the dungeon, RMB, 1 yuan, 1 essence sword pill, 1 sword scar powder. There was no need to explain RMB. It was the common currency in the game, and the exchange rate with the universal points in reality was 1. In other words, Guhan had worked hard to complete the entire beginner dungeon, but his cash reward was only 1 yuan. It was worth mentioning that RMB in the game could be exchanged for RMB in reality, and RMB in reality could also be exchanged for RMB in the game, but there was a fee. The essence sword pill was a pill that could increase the essence sword value in the game after consumption. This pill could not be traded, discarded, or dropped. The way to obtain it was also very simple. Other than a few very rare quests and activities, basically only dungeons could produce essence sword pills. After consumption, the essence sword pill could directly increase 1 essence sword value, which would then be converted into acquired essence sword value in reality according to the player's own conversion rate. Guhan's conversion rate was 0.009. 1,000 essence sword value in the game could be converted to 9 acquired essence sword value in reality. In other words, Guhan had to clear the beginner dungeon 1,000 times to be able to increase a mere 9 acquired essence sword value. This was simply a tragedy. The sword mark dust was a necessary item to create a deep sword mark. The sword lady's grade was divided into 9 grades. It was different from the sword lady's innate ability that could not be improved. The grade was an ability that could be improved. Every increase in grade would greatly improve the sword lady's ability. A first-grade sword mistress with an ancient sword could beat a sword mistress with a treasured sword, but only a 9th-grade sword mistress. Deep sword scars was the only way to increase a sword mistress grade, and sword scar powder was a necessity for deep sword scars. Every increase in grade required a different amount of sword scar powder. As mentioned above, RMB, essence sword pill, and sword scar powder were fixed dungeon rewards for every dungeon. They were affectionately called by players as the 3 elements of a dungeon, and were deeply loved by the masses. Player Military Governor, this is your first time clearing the Yu King Gojian Sword Instance Dungeon. Enjoy the benefits of double the reward for clearing the first time. Your overall rating for clearing the first time is SSS rank. According to the rules, you can enjoy 100 times the basic reward. Player Military Governor, your final instance dungeon reward is RMB, 100, 100 essence sword pills, 100 sword mark dust. Please continue to work hard and reach new heights. As the name suggested, the double reward for clearing the dungeon for the first time was a bonus that could only be obtained by clearing the dungeon for the first time. Among them, the lowest grade, the F grade, did not double. E grade evaluation doubled, D grade evaluation doubled, C grade evaluation tripled, B grade evaluation quintupled, A grade evaluation quintupled, S 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 grade evaluation quintupled. Even if most players had done their homework, their first instance dungeon rating would generally be around B rank, which was 5 times the basic reward. Looking at the 5 renminbi in his hand, and then looking at Guhan's 100 renminbi, Guhan's efficiency had reached a terrifying 20 times. Most importantly, even the essence sword pill reward had been increased by 100 times. The production of essence sword pills was very low, and directly increasing the value of essence sword pills was a non-tradable item. It was definitely the most difficult item to obtain. If this item could be traded, it was guaranteed that there would be a large number of players willing to exchange 100 renminbi for 1 essence sword pill. Unfortunately, this benefit was only available for clearing the dungeon for the first time. Otherwise, Guhan would definitely study every instance dungeon to the SSS rank before giving up. As soon as cashier 0791 finished speaking, a 100 renminbi bill, a large box of pills, and 100 small red and blue capsules suddenly appeared on the table in front of Guhan. Each capsule contained a portion of sword scar powder. These were the basic rewards. Most players who saw these rewards would eagerly put them into their dimensional pockets. After all, it was better to be safe than sorry. However, Guhan did not make a move. Instead, he patiently waited for the next reward. Next up is the reward capsule machine. Since this is your first time clearing the dungeon, the ratio of gold and purple eggs will be increased by 10 times. With a wave of his hand, a small capsule machine appeared on the table. There were 10 different colored eggs in the capsule machine. There was 1 golden egg, 2 purple eggs, 3 blue eggs, and 4 white eggs. If it was not the first time clearing the dungeon, there would be 100 eggs in the capsule machine. Among them, there was 1 gold egg, 2 purple eggs, 30 blue eggs, and 38 white eggs. The ratio of gold and purple eggs was indeed reduced by more than 10 times. Depending on the color of the eggs, the rewards contained in the capsule were also very different. The trashiest was the white capsule. If you opened the capsule, you would be lucky to find even 1 RMB inside. Most of the other eggs were only a few cents or even a few cents. The better ones were the blue eggs, which were worth at least 1 yuan. There were also a lot of random things inside, and even the rare sword pill might appear. Above the blue capsules were the purple capsules. These were the capsules that most players dreamed of obtaining. Not only did they contain a large amount of money and a few essence sword pills, but they could also obtain a token from a sword lady. With this token, the player could obtain a chance to synchronize with the target sword lady. The most difficult to obtain was the golden capsule. This type of capsule existed in every capsule machine. However, it was extremely rare to get one out of every 10 million attempts. The rewards contained within it were all-encompassing. Basically, anything that could be found in the game could appear in the golden capsule. Unfortunately, although the golden capsule was an inherent item in the capsule machine, according to the statistics of the players, there would only be one golden capsule out of every 10 million attempts. The probability was even lower than winning the lottery. To the players, the golden capsule was nothing. If they could obtain a few purple capsules in their lives, they could die without regrets. The reward segment of the capsule was the segment that all players looked forward to the most. It was the segment that they were most excited about and hated the most. Some of the players from Europe with max luck value were able to twist out the best golden egg with just one chance and obtain a famous sword-level sword maiden from it. As for the players from Africa, even after using up all 9 chances, the golden toy egg still remained in the toy capsule machine, not moving at all. In the game's forum, the most active section that constantly flooded the screen was the capsule machine section. Countless players showed off their capsule results in this section. It was understandable for the Europeans to show off their capsules, but it was the same for the Africans. What kind of mentality was this? There may be something inside that you've lost. Suddenly, Cashier 0791 said. What? What did you say? Guhan hurriedly asked. Something I lost. Isn't it just the King of Yu Gojian? Could it be that the King of Yu Gojian exists within the capsule? If the golden capsule could be twisted, then it was not impossible for the King of Yu Gojian to be contained within it. I'm sorry, Cashier 0791 is unable to understand your question. Cashier 0791 was expressionless. I'm a robot, so I don't seem to have a high IQ. Alright, then, how many chances do I have to twist the capsule? Only one chance. Guhan stared at the capsule machine eagerly. The golden capsule inside was exceptionally dazzling. For a long time, Guhan had been researching the dungeon's specific strategy. As for the egg twisting, Guhan had never paid attention to the gambling nature of the egg twisting, so he did not know the detailed rules within. Player Military Governor, SSS, SS, S, A, B, C, D, E, F, 9 levels. Every time you reach a level, you will receive a chance to twist the capsule. You have an SSS rating, so you have 9 chances to twist the capsule. Then, after every twist, will the total number of capsules in the capsule machine remain at 10? Guhan asked. No, the number of capsules in the capsule machine will not increase. No way. The number of capsules in the capsule machine will not increase. Guhan found it hard to believe. He had 9 chances, which meant that there would only be 1 capsule left in the capsule machine. He had a 90% chance of obtaining the golden capsule. This was illogical. Didn't they say that the chance of obtaining the golden capsule was only 1 in 10 million? Truth be told, the chance of obtaining the golden capsule was indeed 1 in 10 million. First of all, not all players were like Guhan, able to obtain an SSS rating. Most of the players were around AB rating, so they only had 5 chances to twist the capsule. But here came the problem. 5 chances was still half. Even if there was only 1 chance, it would still be 1 in 10. How could there be 1 in 10 million? Ahem, this capsule machine was not a real capsule machine after all. It was just a string of data written by humans. It would not listen to Newton's laws of physics. You have reached an F rating. You can proceed with the egg twisting once. 0791 was expressionless, as if he was a robot. Okay, I'll twist it. Guhan glanced at 0791 and simply pressed the button on the capsule machine. The capsule inside began to move frantically until a white capsule rolled out from the bottom of the capsule machine. The feeling of the white capsule was similar to that of a ping-pong ball. Guhan gently twisted the capsule open. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have obtained a white capsule. You have extracted 1 RMB from it. A RMB note fell out of the capsule. Guhan's luck was quite good. This was the upper limit for a white capsule. You have reached an E rating. You can proceed with the egg twisting once. Guhan received another chance to twist the capsule. There were a total of 9 capsules in the capsule machine. 1 white capsule had already been twisted out, leaving 4 white capsules. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have obtained a white capsule. You have extracted 1 RMB from it. This time, it was another white capsule. Unfortunately, his luck was not as good as the previous one. He only obtained 1 RMB. You have reached a D rating. You can proceed with the egg twisting once. Another chance to twist the capsule. This time, the probability of extracting a white capsule had decreased significantly. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have obtained a white capsule. You have extracted 3 RMB from it. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have obtained a white capsule. You have extracted 1 portion of sword mark dust from it. Guhan almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The first 4 times he twisted the capsule, all white capsules came out. Guhan refused to believe that there was no shady deal involved. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have obtained a blue capsule. You have extracted 2 portions of sword mark dust from it. What the hell? The white capsule was already empty. Could you get anything worse than the blue one? Guhan's expression was extremely ugly. However, he still had to continue twisting the capsule. The next 2 times were still blue capsules. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have obtained a blue capsule. You have extracted 1 portion of Bai Tiejian's shampoo from it. Congratulations to player Military Governor. You have obtained a blue capsule. You have extracted 5 RMB from it. Continue. Guhan did not even look at what he had extracted. He casually tossed it into the pile of rewards on the table. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the remaining 3 capsules in the capsule machine. Bai Tiejian's shampoo. Special item. Tradable. Unbound. Drops on death. Easily damaged. Description: Sword Lady Bai Tiejian's favorite shampoo. It can wash out long, black hair. It is her keepsake. Function: collect 10 bottles of shampoo and give them to Bai Tiejian. You will receive Sword Lady Bai Tiejian's love. Synchronize with her. Once successful, you will become Sword Lady Bai Tiejian's sword wielder. Remark: due to differences in bloodline and genes, synchronize has a certain chance of failure. If it fails, the shampoo will disappear. Chapter 18. At that moment, there was only 1 golden egg and 2 purple eggs left in the capsule machine. That was a total of 3 eggs and the last 2 chances to make a choice. From the looks of it, Guhan still had a 1/3 chance of obtaining the golden egg, which was quite a high chance. However, in reality, with this system that was full of shady deals, bugs, and under-the-table manipulations, Guhan felt that there was a 99% chance that he would not be able to obtain the golden egg. However, even if there was only a 1% chance, Guhan still had to give it a try. 12 years of hard work was all on these 3 eggs. Guhan extended his finger and firmly pressed the button of the capsule machine. With a push, the remaining 3 eggs in the capsule machine started to roll violently. Guhan's eyes were fixed on the 3 eggs, especially the golden egg. He hoped that it would obediently roll to the exit. Under Guhan's gaze, the golden egg almost fell to the exit a few times, but it would always bounce back to the top of the capsule machine. In the end, Guhan was unable to fulfill his wish, and a purple egg fell out of the exit. Guhan held the purple egg in his hand and sighed. With a random twist, he opened the capsule. If other players saw this, they would definitely jump up and give Guhan a good beating. What a joke! Which lucky person who obtained a purple egg didn't burn incense, light candles, and pray to the goddess of luck to open her eyes and silently say, "I'm a European. I'm a European. I'm a European." Only after repeating it 100 times would they respectfully open the capsule. Who would be like Guhan, ruining the precious purple egg? Congratulations to player Military Governor, you have obtained a purple egg. You have twisted a volume of inherent barrier sword cleansing pool from within. It's actually a inherent barrier? Ji-Yuhan was shocked. He didn't think that he would be able to pull out an inherent barrier from the purple egg. This was definitely one of the best rewards that the purple egg contained. In terms of combat, the value of the inherent barrier was much higher than that of a famous swordswoman. Inherent barrier sword cleansing pool. Tradable, not binding. Drops after death. Not easily damaged. Item type, combat support. Barrier attribute, gold. Item origin, Martyr's Palace. Item usage level, famous sword. Item usage requirement, permanently consumes 100 maximum sword essence points for the first use. Every use permanently consumes 10 maximum sword essence points. Item usage effect, after use, a small independent barrier space will be formed with the user as the center. The barrier will not disappear until the user dies. Within this barrier, due to the influence of the sword cleansing pool, all negative attribute skills will not be able to affect or harm the swordswoman. Increases the damage of sword of martial arts and martial arts swordswoman by 30%, stacking effect with all other non-barrier buffs. Since the materials used to make the scroll are extremely precious, there are no more than 15 inherent of barrier scrolls in the real world. I seem to remember that the last time the inherent of barrier was auctioned in the game, it was sold for 5 million renminbi. Moreover, the effect of that inherent of barrier is much weaker than that of the sword cleansing pool. Therefore, this inherent of barrier should be more valuable. Although the inherent of barriers in the game weren't as rare as in real life, the number of inherent of barrier scrolls in existence was definitely not more than 1,000. When Guhan thought of this, the gloominess on his face finally dissipated a little when he thought of the 5 million. For the past 12 years, Guhan had not only spent all of his pension and living expenses in order to research the dungeon strategy, he had also owed the bank quite a lot. With this 5 million, he could at least block the bank's phone calls. However, this only made Guhan slightly happy. The most important thing was still the Yu King Gojian sword. This was what Guhan valued the most. Although the value of the inherent of barrier was only slightly lower than that of a famed sword maiden, in Guhan's heart, it was the difference between the Sichuan Basin and the Himalayas. Player military governor, you still have one last chance to twist the egg. Would you like to begin? Cashier 0791 urged. Of course. This time, Guhan did not simply throw the inherent of barrier into the pile of items on the table. Instead, he carefully placed it into his portable dimensional space. Then, without any hesitation, he quickly pressed the button to twist the egg. The capsule machine began to spin. At this moment, there were only 2 eggs left, one gold and one purple. They moved at high speed in the capsule machine and collided with each other. They looked like 2 dazzling rays of light that constantly refracted and bounced around the transparent capsule machine's glass cover. Perhaps because there were only 2 eggs left, the capsule machine spun for a long time this time. After a full 26 minutes, there was still not a single egg falling out of the opening. During these 26 minutes, Guhan maintained a high level of concentration. His eyes did not leave the capsule machine even once. After using his brain for such a long time, even Guhan could not help but feel a little overwhelmed. At some point, his eyes lost focus and his attention was diverted away from the capsule machine. It's out. A very excited shout was heard. This was the voice of 0791. Ji-Yuhan's attention instantly returned, and then he saw 0791's excited little face that was slightly red. Yes, this NPC had also accompanied him for almost half an hour. This bat was really getting more and more extravagant. Even a normal settlement NPC had been changed to such an advanced artificial intelligence. Guhan's daydream about the AI only lasted for less than a second before he immediately shifted his attention to the falling egg. He grabbed the small basket at the opening and held it tightly. Guhan did not dare to look at the color of the egg inside. Hey, what color is it? What color is it? Guhan did not dare to look, but his other head had already moved closer. 0791 squinted his eyes and tried to see the color of the egg through the gaps between Guhan's fingers. Cough cough. Guhan coughed twice. What color is it? Didn't your system already know? You still need to look at mine. Clark 0791 smiled and retracted his head. Just now, the program malfunctioned. I also do not know what color it is. The program malfunctioned. Guhan's heart tightened. If what this NPC said was true, it meant that the egg this time was not controlled by the system's 1 in 10 million chance. There was a 50% chance that the egg in his hand was gold. Guhan suddenly felt a rush of blood rushing to his brain. He slowly opened his palm. Ding dong, system prompt, broadcast to all channels. The Europeans are here. Player military governor in the egg twisting segment of the instance dungeon has produced a gold-colored egg for the first time ever. Truly, comparisons are odious. Ding dong, system prompt, broadcast to all channels. The Europeans are here. Player military governor in the egg twisting segment of the instance dungeon has produced a gold-colored egg for the first time ever. Truly, comparisons are odious. Ding dong, system prompt, broadcast to all channels. The Europeans are here. Player military governor in the egg twisting segment of the instance dungeon has produced a gold-colored egg for the first time ever. Truly, comparisons are odious. Looking at the gold-colored egg in his hand, Guhan was so excited that he felt like crying. If he had not sworn that he would never shed a single tear in this lifetime, he might have really cried. Hurry up and twist it to see if it's what you want, 0791 urged excitedly. Guhan used action to respond to 0791's urging. He used his trembling hand to forcefully twist the gold-colored egg into two. A silver aurora-like light floated out from the egg and gradually enlarged in the air. First, it was a pair of slender jade feet, then a pair of slender and straight legs, a perfectly curved waist, a full chest, and finally a cold face. Famous sword Lady Yu Wang, as expected, but what was unexpected was that she really appeared. Yu King Gojian sword material, fine copper and meteoric iron origin, innate, spring and autumn, rare, realm, famed sword, unable to advance, grade, 9th grade, upgradable, way of the sword, way of the king, enduring hardships for courage. When Yu King Gojian sword strength is lower than the opponent, damage dealt will be reduced by 50% and protection increased by 100%. At the same time, there is a 10% chance of being completely immune to the opponent's attacks. Awakened form, Maiden sword form sword wielder, military governor deep sword mark, not deep damage, Maiden sword form 0. 062 sword form 0. 085 protection, Maiden sword form 0. 95 sword form 01. 28 agility, Maiden sword form 0. 159 sword form 0. 166 defensive barrier reset time, 30 seconds durability, 100% sword element synchronization point requirement, 10,000 synchronization time requirement, 10 minutes initial sword mark engraving. After synchronization, sword wielder will permanently gain 10,000 sword element points. Sword wielder's reputation will increase by 100 points. Sword mark contract. After synchronization, sword wielder will be able to make sword maidens who are weaker than the wielder's subordinates. One of their basic attributes will be increased by 30% to 90%. Once the sword wielder is no longer related to the sword wielder, the title effect will disappear automatically. Awakened ability basic skill, U country's desolate distance, consumes 1% durability to push a target 1 km away from the wielder. Cooldown, 15 seconds. Passive skill, King of 100 U, during battle, every attack has a 5% chance of summoning a 100 U sword slave. The sword slave will have 15% of the attributes of the Yu King Gojian sword. Based on the grade of the sword maidens, the maximum number of sword slaves that can be summoned is 3, and a maximum of 20. Advanced skill, King of U's Mantis, consumes 10% durability to summon 300 U sword slaves. No cooldown. Ultimate skill, sacrifice all sword slaves to recover 3% durability and increase the damage of the next attack by 30%. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Sword mark restraint nemesis accuracy, when fighting with the Yuchang sword, damage will be increased by 0. 25. Protection will be increased by 0. 5. Agility will be increased by 0.008. When fighting with the Yuchang sword, damage will be increased by 0.35. Protection will be increased by 0.65. Agility will be increased by 0.01. Yu Maiden Lily. When fighting with the Yu Maiden sword, cooldown of all skills will be decreased by 5%. When fighting with the same sword wielder, cooldown of all skills will be decreased by 10%. Incompatible. When fighting with any of the 5 sword ladies, Zhonlu, Chun Jun, Gongbu, Long Quan or Ju Q, all attributes will be reduced by 5%. When fighting with the same swordsman, all attributes will be reduced by 10%. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,